Hello there and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, where curiosity slows down, the lights grow dim, and the stranger corners of our world become a little easier to visit from the safety of a warm room. Tonight, we are heading somewhere very far from ordinary daylight, into a place where there are no trees, no birds, no open sky, and no easy way to turn around without thinking very carefully first. We are going to Orda Cave, an underwater gypsum cave in Russia's Perm region, near the western side of the Ural Mountains, known for its pale walls, its clear cold water, and its long flooded passages that have made it famous among cave divers. It's the kind of place that looks calm in photographs, almost too calm. A diver hovers in clear water, their light shining across white stone that seems to go on and on, like a hallway built under the earth by someone who forgot to add doors. The water can be so clear that distance becomes difficult to judge. Walls look close and far at the same time. A passage may appear wide and welcoming, until you remember that every metre forward is also a metre you must return. And unlike a walk in the forest where you can pause, sit down or look up at the weather, Orda Cave does not offer much room for casual mistakes. It is beautiful, yes, but it is a beauty with rules. Before we go any deeper, I'd love to know where you are listening from tonight. Are you somewhere warm, with a window open and evening air drifting in? Or somewhere cold, wrapped in a blanket while the outside world does its best impression of a freezer? And have you ever been inside a cave, even a dry one, where the air changes, the sound changes, and the ordinary world begins to feel very far behind you? There is something about caves that makes us quiet. Even people who normally talk a great deal, and we all know at least one of those, tend to lower their voices underground. Maybe it is the darkness. Maybe it is the age of the stone. Or maybe the earth simply has a way of reminding us that it was here long before our conversations, and it will not be hurried by them. If you find this journey calming, interesting, or useful as a gentle way to let the day loosen its grip, I'd be very grateful if you gave the video a like and subscribed. It helps this quiet little corner reach others who might also enjoy learning about the world without being shouted at by it. And as always, I hope this story is just interesting enough to keep you company, but not so thrilling that it keeps you wide awake. Although to be fair, if any place on Earth could make a sleepy person suddenly check where the nearest exit is, it might be an underwater cave in cold Russian darkness. Orda Cave is not a tropical dive site. It is not a reef with bright fish, warm currents, and the pleasant feeling that, if all else fails, you can simply rise toward the sun. This is cave diving, which is a very different thing from open water diving. In open water, the surface is above you. In a cave, the surface may be behind you, through a passage, around a corner, past a guideline, beyond several turns, and across a distance that must be measured not by hope, but by air supply, training, discipline, and calm decision-making. That difference is everything. The cave is famous because much of it is underwater, with several kilometres of submerged passages, and many descriptions place its flooded section at around 5 kilometres long. It is also widely described as the largest or longest underwater gypsum cave system in the world, depending on how different surveys and classifications are presented. That little word, gypsum, matters more than it may sound. Many famous caves are limestone caves, shaped by water over long periods. Orda is different. Its pale gypsum and anhydrite walls give the cave its unusual white appearance, and that whiteness is part of what makes it so visually striking. In the beams of dive lights, the stone does not look muddy or brown or hidden. It looks pale, clean, almost carved. Some divers describe the halls as vast and bright, not because there is sunlight down there, but because the walls reflect the light so strongly that the cave seems to glow back at them. And then there is the water. The water of Orda Cave is known for its remarkable clarity. Some sources describe visibility of over 40 metres, and others mention around 50 metres in good conditions. That is extraordinary for a cave. It means that a diver may be able to see far into a passage, across a chamber, or down into a cold flooded space that would be completely hidden in murkier caves. But clear water is not the same as safe water. Clear water can even create its own kind of unease, because it shows you more than you may want to see. The cave does not vanish into darkness immediately. It keeps revealing itself metre after metre, white corridor after white corridor, as though it is inviting you onward with perfect visibility, and then quietly asking whether you remembered the way back. The temperature is another part of Orda's reputation. Reports commonly place the water around 3 to 5 degrees Celsius, which is only a little above freezing. That kind of cold is not just uncomfortable. It affects the body, the hands, the face, the muscles, and eventually the mind. A diver in that water needs proper protection, often a dry suit, thick undergarments, redundant equipment, and the ability to manage tasks while the cold tries to make every movement a little less graceful. It is one thing to clip, check, signal, and turn valves in warm water. It is another to do all of that while your fingers feel like they are slowly being replaced by pieces of wood. And yet, divers go there. Highly trained cave divers travel to Orda because the place is rare. It is not just dangerous. It is not just cold. It is not just long. It is also astonishing. That is the difficult balance with places like this. If it were only frightening, few people would dream of entering. If it were only beautiful, we might forget the seriousness of it. Orda Cave sits in that narrow space where wonder and caution are forced to share the same seat. The cave gives divers enormous underwater rooms, pale tunnels, clear water, and a feeling that they are moving through a hidden section of the planet that most humans will never see directly. But it gives nothing away for free. To understand why divers speak of caves like Orda with respect, and sometimes with fear, it helps to picture the simplest problem. You enter through water, your light is on, your breathing is steady. You follow a guideline because in cave diving the guideline is not decoration. It is the route home. It is the physical connection between you and the exit. It may be thin, almost unimpressive to look at, but in an overhead environment, it is one of the most important objects in the world. If visibility disappears, if silt is disturbed, if a light fails, if stress rises, the line remains. You can touch it. You can follow it. You can move hand over hand through darkness if you have to. In a place where every wrong turn can matter, the line is a simple promise. This way out. Now imagine that promise stretching through cold water into a cave where the walls are white, and the halls are large enough to make a diver feel strangely small. That is part of the mental challenge. In a tight cave, danger feels obvious. Rock is close. Movement is limited. Every breath sounds loud. But in a large, clear passage, danger can be quieter. You may feel free because you can see so much. You may feel calm because the cave looks open. You may feel tempted to go a little farther because the next chamber is visible, and the one beyond that seems only a short swim away. Orda's beauty can encourage the very thing cave divers must manage carefully: the urge to continue. The name itself, Orda Cave, or Ordinskaya Cave, comes from the nearby village of Orda. Above the cave, life is ordinary in the way surface life usually is. Roads, buildings, weather, seasons, people going about their days, perhaps thinking about food, work, family, and small errands that feel large until you compare them with a flooded labyrinth under the ground. Beneath that everyday landscape is a different world entirely. This is one of the things that makes caves so strange. They do not announce themselves honestly from above. A hillside, a riverbank, a patch of land can hide a system that feels almost impossible once you enter it. The surface says, "Here is a quiet place." The underground says, "You have no idea." Orda Cave's entrance area includes dry passages too, though the submerged sections are what made it internationally known. Some accounts describe a dry part of roughly 300 metres and underwater passages of more than 5 kilometres. That means the cave is not simply a hole filled with water. It is a system, a network, a place with separate spaces, transitions, and chambers. In winter, the dry parts can include ice formations, and the official Perm tourism site mentions deep lakes and ice stalactites, stalagmites, and crystals appearing in grottos during winter. So even before a diver disappears below the surface, the cave already has the mood of a place that belongs partly to stone, partly to water, and partly to cold. But tonight, we are not rushing into the water. We're standing at the edge first. That is important. Every serious dive begins long before the first bubble leaves a regulator. It begins with planning. It begins with checking equipment, discussing the route, agreeing on signals, calculating gas, confirming roles, reviewing contingencies, and making sure everyone understands that turning back is not failure. In cave diving, turning back is often the smartest decision a person makes all day. There is no prize for going farther than the plan. The cave does not applaud ambition. It does not care who came the longest distance, who bought the newest gear, or who wants a dramatic story to tell afterward. The cave simply remains itself, cold, flooded, silent, and completely uninterested in excuses. That may sound harsh, but it is also why cave divers respect the environment so deeply. The fear around Orda Cave is not the cartoon kind of fear, with monsters in the dark and sudden music. It is a practical fear, a trained fear, the kind that keeps people alive. Divers fear losing the line. They fear losing visibility. They fear equipment failure, bad decisions, poor communication, cold stress, overconfidence, and the slow creeping pressure of knowing that the exit is not above them. That kind of fear is not weakness. It is a useful instrument, as long as it stays quiet enough to be heard and not so loud that it takes control. In that way, Orda Cave is almost the opposite of a haunted house. A haunted house tries to frighten you with noise. Orda Cave frightens with calm. The water is still. The walls do not move quickly. The passages do not chase anyone. There may be no dramatic sound at all except the diver's own breathing, the faint movement of equipment, and the small mechanical comfort of bubbles finding their way toward whatever ceiling they can find. Everything dangerous is built into the situation itself. Rock above you, cold around you, distance behind you, air on your back, a narrow plan between you and trouble. And this is why the cave has become such a powerful subject for divers, photographers, scientists, and anyone fascinated by the hidden architecture of Earth. It combines opposites in a way that feels almost unfair. It is clear and dangerous, beautiful and severe, spacious and trapping, quiet and demanding. Its white gypsum walls can look peaceful, but the conditions require technical skill and careful discipline. Dive guides and site descriptions often emphasize that Orda is for trained cave divers, not casual visitors with basic scuba experience. It is not a place for improvising. It is not a place for pretending confidence is the same as preparation. Confidence is nice. Preparation is better. In a flooded cave, preparation is what confidence should be made of. Still, there is something deeply human about wanting to see it. We have always been drawn to difficult places. Mountains, deserts, polar ice, deep oceans, volcanoes, caves. Not always because we want to conquer them, though humans do enjoy using that word a little too much. Sometimes we go because we want to understand what is there. Sometimes because the world feels larger when we stand near the edges of it. And sometimes because beauty hidden in a hard place feels different from beauty placed conveniently beside a parking lot with a gift shop and a sandwich counter. Although, to be honest, a sandwich counter near Orda Cave would probably do quite well after a cold dive. Photographs from Orda have helped bring its appearance to people who will never enter it. Underwater photographer Viktor Lyagushkin is strongly associated with efforts to document the cave, including expeditions connected with the Orda Cave Awareness Project. These images often show divers suspended in pale chambers, where scale becomes strange. A human body in a dry room gives you a clear sense of size. A human body in an underwater cave becomes something else, almost like a marker placed inside a hidden cathedral. The diver is both the subject and the measuring tool. Without them, the cave might look like a small passage or an endless one. With them, the viewer suddenly understands that the white walls are not close decorations, but massive surfaces continuing into blue darkness. That blue darkness matters. Even in clear water, light has limits. A diver carries their own small piece of day inside the cave, and beyond that piece of day, the cave continues without needing to be seen. This is part of what makes underwater caves so mentally powerful. On land, darkness can be answered with a lamp and a path. Underwater, darkness is answered with equipment, training, and time. You do not simply stroll forward. You manage buoyancy. You avoid disturbing the bottom. You monitor your breathing gas. You check your team. You notice the line. You control your speed. You keep track of depth, temperature, direction, and your own mind. A calm mind is as much a piece of equipment as the tanks and lights, though unfortunately it cannot be bought, clipped on, and tested in the garage the night before. So tonight, as we begin this journey, we will not treat Orda Cave as a thrill ride. We will treat it as a place, under real ground, with real water cold enough to punish carelessness and clear enough to make the underground look almost welcoming. We will move slowly from the village above it, into the geology that shaped it, through the white flooded halls that made it famous, and into the reasons experienced divers speak of it with both admiration and caution. We will look at the cold, the silence, the long passages, the rules of cave diving, and the strange pull that brings people back to a place that most of us would only visit in photographs, videos, or very detailed bedtime narration. For now, picture the entrance. Not as a doorway to adventure in the loud sense, but as a boundary. Above it, the regular world carries on. Wind, snow, rain, footsteps, engines, voices, the small, busy sounds of human life. Below it, the sound changes. The light changes. The body has to borrow air from a cylinder. The mind has to become more organized. The world narrows into a line, a beam of light, a hand signal, a plan, a breath. And somewhere beyond that first descent, Orda Cave waits in white silence. Not angry, not welcoming, just present. Cold water resting inside pale stone, passageways extending beneath the earth, and a darkness that does not need to move in order to be taken seriously. This is where our journey begins, at the edge of one of the most unusual underwater caves on Earth, where beauty is not separate from danger, and where every calm photograph has a very serious story behind it. Above Orda Cave, before the water, before the white walls, before the careful checks and the cold descent, there is a village. Not a grand entrance with marble signs and dramatic gates, not a place that announces itself like the beginning of an expedition. Just Orda, a rural settlement in Perm-Krai, Russia, set near the Kunga River, with the cave entrance lying outside the village in the landscape around it. That contrast is one of the first strange things about the place. On the surface there is human life. Roads, houses, fences, weather, the ordinary rhythm of a district centre where people have daily things to do. A person might be carrying groceries, someone may be walking home, a dog may be making a serious announcement to no one in particular, as dogs often do. And beneath that same area, hidden in the ground, there is one of the most remarkable underwater cave systems known to divers. It is a reminder that the world does not always separate the ordinary from the extraordinary very neatly. Sometimes the extraordinary waits just beyond the edge of a village, under a hill, beside a river, beneath ground that people have passed for generations. Orda itself is not a giant city built around tourism. It is described as a rural locality, a silo, and the administrative centre of Ordinsky district. It sits in Perm-Krai, a region west of the Ural Mountains, where the landscape carries the long memory of rivers, limestone, gypsum, cold seasons and slow geological work. The name of the cave, Ordinskaya, comes from the nearby village, which gives the place a grounded feeling. This is not a fantasy name invented to sound mysterious. It is a local name attached to a real settlement, a real district, and real people living above a place that later became famous around the world among cave divers. There is something quietly powerful about that. A famous cave is often seen through photographs first. We see divers floating in cold, clear water with light shining across white rock, and the place seems separate from daily life, as though it belongs only to documentaries, diving magazines, or very serious people with many clips attached to their suits. But before it is a dive site, it is part of a local landscape. Before it is a destination, it is somewhere near home for somebody. Before it becomes a name spoken in technical diving circles, it is a cave near a village, shaped by stone, water, and time, while life above continues in a very normal way. The entrance to the cave is not in the middle of a town square, of course. The official tourism information for the Perm region places Ordinskaya Cave inside Kazakovskaya Mountain, described as a plateau-like hill surrounded on 3 sides by the valley of the Kungur River. Other cave information describes the entrance as about 1.5 kilometers northwest of Orda, on a plateau between the Iren and Kungur rivers. That already gives the setting a particular shape. Not a cave standing alone in empty land, but one fitted into a hill near river valleys, close enough to the village that the connection is clear, but far enough away that reaching it still feels like a small departure from the ordinary. Imagine leaving the village and moving toward that hill. The houses begin to fall behind. The noises of daily life grow thinner. There may be trees, open ground, a road or track depending on the route and season, and the knowledge that the entrance is ahead. For most people, a cave entrance is simply a dark opening. Interesting, yes. Maybe a little unsettling. But for divers going to Orda, that opening is the beginning of something far more complex. It is not only a hole in the ground. It is the threshold to an overhead environment, a place where the normal rules of moving through the world change completely. Above ground, the body is simple to manage. You breathe without thinking about it. You can stop and rest. You can turn around without calculating gas pressure. If you drop something, it falls to the ground and usually stays there, unless it is a glove, in which case it may vanish forever through some special law of winter clothing. But underground, and then underwater, every action becomes more deliberate. A diver approaching Orda Cave has already entered a different mental state before the water begins. They are not just sightseeing. They are preparing to move into a place where the exit must be remembered, respected, and physically connected by line. That is why the village above the cave matters. It is the last zone of ordinary human scale before the cave changes the scale completely. In the village, distances are measured by roads, streets, minutes of walking, maybe the time it takes to drive from one place to another. Underwater in the cave, distance is measured by air, depth, visibility, body temperature, line placement, and the ability to return safely. The same kilometre feels different depending on where it is. A kilometre through a village might be a short walk. A kilometre into a flooded cave is a serious commitment. The ground does not change length, but the meaning of length changes. The Perm region itself has long been associated with caves and karst landscapes. Water moving through soluble rock creates underground spaces slowly, patiently, and without concern for human schedules. Orda Cave is especially unusual because it is formed in gypsum and anhydrite, rather than being a typical limestone cave. Sources describe it as consisting of gypsum and anhydrite, and it is widely known as the largest underwater gypsum cave in the world. That word gypsum follows the village like a secret ingredient. It is a mineral many people know in a very ordinary form because gypsum is used in plaster and wallboard. The same kind of material that helps make ordinary rooms inside ordinary houses is also part of what gives Orda Cave its pale, unreal underwater halls. That is a good reminder that nature has a sense of humour, or at least an unusual filing system. A person in Orda might live inside a house with plaster walls, while not far away, beneath the surrounding land, gypsum forms vast white corridors filled with freezing water. The familiar and the strange are made from the same material. One becomes a wall in a room, the other becomes a submerged passage that experienced divers approach with care. It is not magic, it is geology. But geology, when given enough time, often looks like magic that does not need to explain itself. The surface landscape also gives the cave part of its character. Rivers matter, valleys matter. Hills matter. Water has to come from somewhere, move somewhere, dissolve something, carry minerals, freeze, thaw, drain, and return. The Kunga River is repeatedly mentioned in descriptions of Orda Cave's location, and the cave entrance is described as near its shore or connected to the surrounding valley system. Above ground, the river is part of the visible landscape. Below ground, water becomes the defining condition of the cave. It fills much of the system, turns passageways into diving routes, and transforms a geological feature into one of the most demanding and beautiful underwater environments on Earth. The village, then, is not just a convenient point on a map. It is part of the story because it shows how close hidden worlds can be to ordinary ones. We tend to imagine extreme places as remote in every possible way. The deep ocean, Antarctica, the summit of a high mountain, the inside of a volcano, places where a person expects to feel far from daily life. Orda Cave is remote in a different sense. It is not on another planet. It is near a village. People can travel toward it by road after reaching Perm, and one cave diving travel account describes continuing from Perm by car for a few hours to reach Orda. Yet once a diver enters the cave water, the ordinary world becomes unreachable in the immediate sense. It may be geographically close, but practically distant. The village may be only a short distance away, but if you are deep inside a flooded passage, that closeness does not help unless you have planned properly. That is one of the quiet truths of cave diving. The surface can be close and still impossible to reach directly. In open water, you may be 20 meters below the surface, but the direction of escape is simple. Up. In a cave, the surface is not a direction. It is a route. The route may turn, narrow, widen, split, slope, and continue through places where a mistake costs time, and time costs air. So the village above Orda is not simply above the cave in a physical sense, it is above another set of rules. Above, a person can be casual. Below, casual behaviour has no place. There is also a human history to the cave's discovery and exploration, and that story begins with local presence rather than international fame. One account in X-Ray Mag describes early local visitors entering after a cow had fallen down into the cave, leading them to see large halls, chambers, and underground lakes with clear water. It also describes researcher Igor Lavrov visiting in 1993 and early reconnaissance dives, beginning in 1994. Stories like that have the slightly odd texture of real history. A world-famous cave diving site does not always begin with a grand scientific ceremony. Sometimes it begins with a practical local problem, a missing or fallen animal, a difficult slope, and people going down to see what happened. The hidden underworld first reveals itself not as a tourist attraction, but as a surprise. That surprise must have been powerful. Imagine expecting a rough underground space and finding halls, chambers and lakes clear enough to make people wonder what lay beneath them. A dry cave is already enough to change the mood of a day. Underground lakes add another layer entirely. A lake inside a cave does not behave emotionally, of course, but to a human observer it feels like a question. Where does it go? How deep is it? Is there a passage below? Is this the end, or only the visible surface of something larger? For a cave diver, those questions are not casual. They are the beginning of survey work, risk assessment, training requirements, and exploration. For a local person standing near the water, the lake might simply say, very clearly, There is more here than you thought. The village above would have known the land in ordinary ways long before divers came with specialised equipment. People know local hills, rivers, weather, road conditions, winter difficulties, and the places children should or should not wander. But a cave can remain partly unknown even to those who live near it. That is not because local people are inattentive. It is because caves hide information in a very literal way. A field shows itself. A forest can be walked. A river can be followed. A cave keeps its length secret until someone enters, maps, dives, measures, returns, and does it again. Even then, the cave may keep some secrets because conditions, restrictions, or safety limits prevent full access. Underground knowledge is earned slowly. By the time Orda became known among divers, the village had become the name attached to an extraordinary place. Visiting divers arriving in Orda do not arrive only at a cave. They arrive at a community near the cave, a real settlement that provides the surface setting for their expedition. Travel accounts mention Orda as a typical Ural village with many wooden houses, giving visitors the feeling of stepping away from modern city life. That kind of surface detail may seem small, but it matters for the mood of the story. A diver may travel from an airport, pass through the city of Perm, drive across the region, and then arrive in a village where the pace feels different. The cave does not begin with the dive. It begins with the journey to a place where the world has already grown quieter. And quiet is useful. The mind needs time to adjust before entering a place like Orda. It is easy for people watching a video to move instantly from one scene to the next. One moment, a map. The next, a diver underwater. The next, a glowing white tunnel. But real diving is not edited that way. Real diving includes waiting, loading equipment, checking seals, discussing plans, warming hands, moving cylinders, watching weather, reviewing maps, and perhaps standing for a moment with the village behind you and the entrance ahead. That waiting is not wasted time. It is part of how the mind enters the cave before the body does. The above-ground world also reminds divers that they are visitors. That is important. Orda Cave is not a stage built for adventure. It is a natural monument and a fragile environment. The International Show Caves Association describes Ordinskaya Cave as having the status of an all-Russia natural monument, and other sources emphasize its uniqueness as an underwater gypsum cave. A diver entering it is entering a place that was formed long before any human had a regulator, a dry suit, or the unfortunate habit of naming every piece of equipment with an acronym. The village may be recent compared with the cave. The divers are even more recent. The cave itself belongs to a much longer timescale. This difference in timescale is one reason caves feel serious. Villages change, roads are repaired, houses are built, painted, abandoned or replaced. Families move in and out. A district centre has records, dates, names and events. The cave changes too, but differently. Water dissolves, deposits, freezes, clears, and moves according to conditions that are not interested in human urgency. A passage may take thousands of years to form. A careless fin kick can disturb visibility in seconds. A broken formation, where formations exist, may not return in any meaningful human lifetime. That contrast gives cave environments a special moral pressure. They ask for skill, but also restraint. The road from village life to cave life is also a road from noise to focus. A diver may talk casually while preparing gear. There may be jokes, because divers are still human, and humans use humour to make heavy equipment and cold weather more bearable. Someone may complain about a glove. Someone may be searching for a missing clip that was definitely right there a minute ago. Someone may make tea, which is one of civilization's better answers to the problem of cold places. But as the dive approaches, the mood changes. Speech becomes more practical. Checks become specific. The surface world narrows toward the task. That is when Orda's hidden underworld begins to press into awareness. It is not seen yet, but it is understood. Below the hill, passages extend through gypsum and anhydrite for several kilometres, with most of the system underwater. UNESCO-related coverage describes the passage system as stretching through gypsum and anhydrite for over 5 kilometres, almost completely underwater. The cave is no longer just a location. It becomes a set of decisions waiting to happen. Which route? Which gas plan? Which team? Which turn pressure? Which equipment configuration? Which maximum distance? The village may have streets and signs. The cave has lines and rules. There is a strange tenderness in thinking about the village above all this. Not sentimental, not dramatic, just practical and human. While divers prepare to enter one of the most intimidating underwater cave environments in the world, someone nearby may be doing something completely ordinary. Making dinner, fixing a fence, looking at a phone, waiting for a bus, arguing gently with a stubborn door. Life above continues without needing to understand every passage below. That is how the world usually works. We live on top of mysteries all the time. We just do not always have maps that prove it. Caves make that fact obvious. They show us that the surface is not the whole story. A village can be a village and also be the marker for a hidden system beneath the land. A hill can be a hill and also contain chambers. A river valley can be part of daily geography and also part of a larger underground process. The visible world is useful, but it is incomplete. Orda is a strong example because the difference between above and below is so extreme. Above, air. Below, water. Above, roads. Below, flooded corridors. Above, ordinary time. Below, time measured in breathing gas and careful movement. This is why the beginning of the Orda story should stay above ground for a while. It is tempting to rush straight into the cave because that is where the images are most dramatic. But the village gives the cave context. It helps us understand that the entrance is not floating in a mythic nowhere. It is placed in a landscape, near rivers, near people, near a settlement with its own history and pace. That makes the hidden underworld feel more real, not less. The most unsettling mysteries are not always far away. Sometimes they are just outside the edge of normal life. As the divers move from Orda toward the cave entrance, the journey becomes a kind of quiet narrowing. The wide region becomes the district becomes the village. The village becomes the hill becomes the entrance becomes the dry passage or descent becomes the water becomes the line becomes the way home. Each step removes some freedom and replaces it with focus. That is not a bad thing. Focus is what allows people to enter difficult places safely. But it changes the mood. The land around the cave does not need to look frightening to be serious. In fact, that may be part of its power. Many dangerous places do not look dangerous at first. A calm sea can hide current. A snowy slope can hide avalanche risk. A quiet cave entrance can lead to a flooded system where mistakes are unforgiving. Orda's surface setting may appear simple, even peaceful, but the cave below has its own demands. It does not matter whether the village above is quiet, whether the weather is pleasant, or whether the photographs look beautiful. The cave must be approached on its terms. And those terms begin before anyone touches the water. A diver must understand that the village above is the last easy reference point. It is the place where ordinary assumptions still work. Once the cave environment takes over, human comfort has to be engineered. Warmth comes from exposure protection. Breathing comes from cylinders and regulators. Direction comes from line. Communication comes from lights and hand signals. Safety comes from training, teamwork, and conservative decisions. The body can no longer rely on the casual support systems it uses on the surface. Everything must be brought in, checked, carried, and used correctly. There is a quiet lesson in that, and it is not only for divers. Places like Orda Cave remind us that the surface of things can be misleading. A village can sit above a labyrinth. A small entrance can open into kilometres of passage. A calm photograph can represent years of training. A clear pool can lead into cold darkness. The world is full of layers, and some of those layers are not meant to be entered lightly. So for now, let us stay with the image of Orda above the cave. A rural settlement in Perm Cry, a river nearby, a plateau-like hill holding a cave inside it. People living their surface lives over stone and water that formed through processes far older than the village itself. Divers arriving from elsewhere, carrying equipment and anticipation. The entrance waiting outside the ordinary pattern of streets and houses. Nothing dramatic needs to happen yet. The important thing is the contrast. Because the deeper story of Orda Cave does not begin with fear. It begins with nearness. The hidden world is close to the human one. Close enough to name. Close enough to visit. Close enough that a person can stand above it, breathe normal air, hear the surface world around them, and know that only a short distance away the rules will change. The village remains behind, steady and human, while the cave waits under Kazakovskaya mountain in cold water and pale stone, ready to show why a place can be beautiful, famous, carefully studied, and still treated with deep caution by the people who know it best. What makes Orda Cave so visually different from many other caves is not only that it is flooded, or cold, or difficult to enter safely, it is the material itself. Orda is a gypsum cave, with passages formed in gypsum and anhydrite, and that gives its underwater rooms their pale, almost white appearance. The cave is often described as the world's largest underwater gypsum cave, with a dry section of about 300 metres and an underwater section commonly listed at more than 5 kilometres. That alone makes it unusual, but numbers do not fully explain why divers speak about it the way they do. 5 kilometres on a map is one thing. 5 kilometres of cold, flooded corridors beneath stone is another thing entirely. Gypsum is a soft mineral compared with many harder rocks, and caves can form in soluble rocks such as limestone, dolomite, marble, salt and gypsum, when water slowly dissolves the rock and enlarges cracks and passages. That process does not happen in a hurry. It is not dramatic like a cliff falling into the sea or a volcano throwing ash into the sky. It is slow, patient and easy to underestimate. Water enters small weaknesses. It moves through joints and bedding planes. It dissolves what it can. It carries material away. Over long periods, spaces grow where there were once only cracks. The National Speleological Society explains that solution caves are formed when solid rock is dissolved by acidic water, and that these caves can occur in gypsum as well as other soluble rocks. That is the practical explanation at least. Water dissolves rock, cracks widen, chambers form. But when you look at Orda Cave underwater, the practical explanation does not quite prepare you for the visual result. The walls are not dark and muddy in the way many people might expect from an underground flooded space. They are pale. The stone reflects light from a diver's lamp, so a chamber can seem to open around the diver in a soft white glow. Not sunlight, of course. There is no sun down there. The only light is carried by the people entering the cave, but because the gypsum walls are so bright compared with many cave surfaces, the light does not simply vanish into blackness. It spreads, bounces back, and gives the passage a strange, cold clarity. This is one reason photographs of Orda Cave can look almost unreal. A diver appears suspended in blue water, beside enormous white surfaces, with no sand beach, no coral, no green plants, and no obvious signs of ordinary life. The body is familiar. The equipment is familiar if you know diving. But the place around the diver seems unfamiliar. It does not resemble the caves most people visit on holiday, where a guide points at stalactites and someone in the group tries to take a flash photograph that helps no one. Orda's interior is different because its gypsum structure does not resemble many typical limestone caves with their hanging formations and rising pillars. The Orda Cave Dive Centre describes it as a gypsum cave, whose interior does not have the usual appearance of caves with stalactites and stalagmites. Instead, the cave is known for large blocks, white tunnels, vertical cracks, arches, windows in walls, and broad underwater rooms. The same source describes huge white tunnels, rock cracks, wall windows, arches, underwater rock gardens, and narrow sections that open into larger rooms. That is a very different kind of beauty. It is not delicate in the usual cave tour sense. It is not a ceiling covered with thin stone straws or a chamber full of orange and brown mineral curtains. It is broad, pale, and architectural. The cave looks less like a decorated room and more like a flooded structure made by slow geological pressure and water movement, as if the earth carved halls for reasons of its own and then filled them with water before anyone could ask for a tour schedule. And the water matters as much as the stone. Without the water, Orda would still be a remarkable gypsum cave. With the water, it becomes something far more demanding and visually strange. The water in Orda is known for being exceptionally clear, with descriptions of visibility reaching around 45 metres when divers move carefully. It is also cold, around 4 to 5 degrees Celsius in many reports, and the surrounding mineral-rich area is often credited with helping filter the water. That clarity is one of the cave's most famous features. In many underwater places, the water hides distance. In Orda, the water reveals distance, and that can be beautiful and unsettling at the same time. Imagine standing in a long hallway with every light turned off except the one in your hand. Now imagine that hallway is underwater, freezing cold and made of pale mineral walls. Your light reaches forward, and because the water is so clear, you can see farther than you expected. At first, that might feel comforting. Visibility is useful. Divers like to see where they're going, just as most of us prefer not to walk into furniture in the dark. But in a cave, good visibility can create a particular kind of temptation. You can see the next section, so it seems close. You can see the next opening, so it seems reachable. You can see the passage continuing, so your mind begins to wonder what is beyond it. The danger is that clear water can make distance feel easy. It is not easy. Every metre forward must be planned as a metre that must be returned through. The cave may look bright in the beam of a lamp, but the brightness belongs only to the area touched by that lamp. Behind the diver, above the diver, beyond the line of sight, the cave remains dark. A photograph freezes one clean moment, but a dive is not one clean moment. It is a chain of decisions. Breathing, buoyancy, fin movement, gas checks, communication, line awareness, body position, and the constant need not to damage the cave or disturb the bottom. The ghostly light people notice in Orda is not a property of the cave by itself. It is the meeting of white gypsum, clear water, and artificial light carried carefully by divers who know the cave does not forgive careless movement. The word gypsum may sound ordinary because so many people live around gypsum without thinking about it. It is used in plaster and wallboard, in the flat surfaces of homes, offices, schools, and places where people sit through meetings that feel longer than some geological periods. But in Orda, gypsum appears in a form that is not domestic or neat. It becomes the body of a flooded underground system. The same broad category of material that helps make ordinary walls can also form pale, underwater corridors in the Urals. There is something almost funny about that, in a quiet way. One version of gypsum holds up a shelf in a living room. Another version waits in freezing water while cave divers check their backup lights. Anhydrite, which is also mentioned in descriptions of Orda's rock, is closely related to gypsum in the broader family of evaporate minerals, though its chemistry differs because it lacks the water molecules that gypsum contains. For the diver, the practical result is not a chemistry lesson written on a slate at the cave entrance. It is the visible structure of the cave itself. Pale stone, blocky surfaces, cracks, broken pieces, and walls that seem to catch the light differently from darker rock. Global geography describes Orda as consisting of gypsum and anhydrite, dating back to the Permian period, which places the rock in a very old geological context, even before any person, village, or diving plan was imaginable. That age is important to hold in mind without turning it into a grand speech. A diver entering Orda is not entering a recent space. The rock belongs to a past so old that human history barely appears beside it. Yet the actual dive is made up of very immediate things. A dry suit seal must sit properly. A regulator must breathe correctly. A line must be followed. A hand must not slip. The old and the immediate meet in every movement. Ancient mineral walls on one side, a very modern pressure gauge on the other. It is a strange pairing, but cave diving is full of that. The earth provides the setting. Human engineering provides the temporary permission to visit. The pale light in Orda also changes the sense of scale. In a dark cave with poor visibility, a diver may feel enclosed because everything disappears quickly beyond the light. In Orda, the clear water and reflective surfaces can reveal large volumes around the diver. The Orda Cave Awareness Project describes the cave as having huge volumes of underwater passages, low water temperature, and remarkable visibility. A diver can look across a chamber and see stone continuing far away, but still not know the place in a casual way. Seeing is not the same as understanding. Clear water lets the eyes travel. It does not remove the need to follow the plan. The size of some spaces can make a human body look very small. That is part of the cave's visual pull. In photographs, a diver may look like a tiny dark figure inside a pale flooded hall. The lamp beam gives a direction. The bubbles give a sense of movement. The line, if visible, gives the eye something to follow, but the cave itself dominates the scene. It does not need colour to be dramatic. It uses shape, distance, and brightness. White stone below, white stone above, blue water between. A person in black equipment hovering carefully in the middle, trying not to stir anything, trying not to touch anything, trying to remain a visitor rather than a disturbance. That careful movement is more important in gypsum caves than a casual viewer might guess. Orda's dive centre notes that divers must move with finesse, and the exhaled air near the rock can react with the gypsum and create a cloudy substance. It also describes the bottom as mostly muddy because of material crumbling from the ceiling. So the clear water is not something divers can simply take for granted. It depends on behaviour. Bad finning can disturb fine material. Poor buoyancy can bring a diver too close to the floor or ceiling. Exhaled bubbles can strike overhead surfaces. A cave that looks crystal clear in one moment can become more difficult if the team moves carelessly. This is where the beauty of order becomes tied directly to discipline. The cave is not only a place to look at, it is a place that shows whether a diver can control themselves, not in a dramatic, heroic way, but in a practical, quiet way. Can the diver hold position without grabbing the wall? Can they move forward without sweeping the floor with their fins? Can they turn without hitting the ceiling? Can they manage equipment without losing awareness of the line? Can they enjoy the view without forgetting the rule that the view is never more important than the exit? These questions are not decorative. They are part of the environment. The white walls can also affect the mind. In many caves, darkness feels like the main visual fact. In Orda, whiteness becomes the fact that surprises people. A white cave underwater sounds peaceful, and it can look peaceful, but the effect may also feel disorienting. Pale surfaces can make shapes blend together. Clear water can make distance difficult to judge. Large passages can remove the tight physical cues that usually remind a person they are inside rock. A diver may feel as if they are floating through a frozen building with no floor plan. The cave can look open, but it is still an overhead environment. There is still rock between the diver and the surface. There is still no direct descent. The cold adds its own visual quality. Cold water often looks sharper in the imagination, even though temperature itself cannot be seen. When a diver knows the water is only a few degrees above freezing, the entire scene feels different. The blue is not tropical blue. The whiteness is not beach sand white. It is the white of mineral walls in a cold place, lit by lamps in water that demands dry suits and serious preparation. Reports place Orda's water around 4 to 5 degrees Celsius, which helps explain why exposure protection is not a comfort choice, but a safety requirement. A diver who gets too cold loses dexterity, comfort, and eventually judgment. The cave's beauty comes with a temperature that keeps the body from relaxing too much. That may be one reason Orda has such a strong reputation among underwater photographers. The place looks clean, bright, and enormous, but photographing it is not simple. A camera does not remove the cave's demands. The photographer is still a cave diver. The model is still a cave diver. The team still needs lights, line awareness, gas management, and the ability to avoid damaging the environment. The Orda Cave Awareness Project grew out of efforts to document the cave's beauty, and its description emphasises that only a small number of people had seen and photographed the cave compared with ordinary tourist sites. That makes sense. This is not a roadside viewpoint where anyone can pull over, take 3 pictures, and complain that the battery is low. Orda asks more from anyone who wants to bring back images. The lighting itself becomes a technical problem. In open air, a photographer can use sunlight, reflections, tripods, and normal space. Underwater in a cave, light must be carried in. It spreads differently through water. It reflects from suspended particles. It fades with distance. The white gypsum helps by reflecting light, but it can also create bright surfaces and deep shadows. The diver's lamp may show part of a passage while leaving another part hidden. That half-revealed look is part of what makes Orda feel so strange on camera. You're not looking at a fully lit room. You're looking at a place that reveals itself only where the light reaches, while the rest of the cave continues beyond the frame. In that sense, the ghostly light of Orda is not supernatural. It is physical. Pale rock, clear water, lamps, distance, cold, and darkness working together. The cave does not glow by itself like a lantern. It reflects. It takes the diver's light and gives some of it back. That is more interesting than a ghost story really, because it is real. A diver's equipment creates the visible cave for a short time. When the divers leave, the light leaves too. The water remains clear. The gypsum remains pale. The passages remain there, but no one sees them until another trained team returns with lamps and enough caution to move through this place properly. This temporary visibility gives underwater caves a particular mood. A mountain is visible whether or not a climber is there. A forest is visible in daylight. A desert can be seen from above. But the inside of Orda's underwater passages is mostly unseen most of the time. It exists in darkness, not because it is trying to hide, but because that is simply the condition underground. Human presence does not create the cave, but it briefly creates the view. That can make the diver feel privileged, and also very small. The cave is not performing. It is just being illuminated for a few minutes by a visitor carrying batteries. The walls themselves carry signs that this is an active, changing environment, not a sealed museum display. The dive centre account mentions fallen rock pieces, some appearing fresh, and notes that changing water levels connected with the nearby Kunga River can affect formations and cause material to break away. That is a useful correction to the idea that caves are frozen forever. They are slow but not still. Gypsum is soluble. Water levels change. Ceilings shed material. Mud collects. Passages may look clean in the wide-angle photographs, but the cave is part of an ongoing physical system. It has not finished being shaped. For divers, that means the cave must be read as well as admired. A clean wall, a muddy bottom, a fallen block, a narrow restriction, a ceiling with pockets of trapped air, a passage widening into a room. All of these are information. The cave is not a blank white hallway. It has texture and behaviour. It has places where a team can move comfortably and places where they must tighten control. It has areas that may feel spacious and others that remind divers very quickly that rock is still rock and equipment still has width. One section, is even known by the name mousetrap because of the squeezed feeling it gives divers passing through rocks. That name is not especially relaxing, but at least it is honest. If someone names a passage mousetrap, it is probably not where you want to practice casual spinning. The lack of typical stalactite and stalagmite scenery can make Orda seem simpler at first glance, but that would be a mistake. Its complexity is in its volume, its pale surfaces, its submerged roots, its clarity, and its relationship with light. In a limestone show cave, the visitor's eye often moves from formation to formation. Here, the eye moves through space itself. It follows corridors, cracks, ceilings, slopes, and blocks. The cave is less decorated, but not less detailed. It asks the viewer to notice shape instead of ornament. And because the water is so transparent, shape becomes the main visual language. A wall window is not just a feature, it is a possible view into another space. An arch is not just a curve, it is a route, a frame, and sometimes a reminder of how easily the cave can make a diver want to pass through and keep exploring. A vertical crack is not just a line in rock, it is a sign of stress, structure, and the way water found weakness. The cave's beauty is not separate from its geology. The same processes that made it beautiful also made it complex. The same water that helped form and fill it also makes it dangerous to enter without training. This is the part that can be difficult for non-divers to fully feel. In a video, Orda's clear water and white walls may look gentle. The diver moves slowly, and the scene seems calm. But the calmness is partly produced by skill. A cave diver who is in control looks almost weightless and relaxed. Their fins move smoothly, their body stays level, they avoid the floor and ceiling, they do not stir the cave into a cloud. What looks easy is often the result of long practice. In a place like Orda, beauty rewards control. The better the diver moves, the more the cave remains visible. The worse the diver moves, the more quickly the cave can become difficult. So when we say Orda is made of gypsum, water, and ghostly light, we are really saying it is made of several real things working together. The gypsum gives the cave its pale body. The water fills the passages and preserves the feeling of suspended silence. The clear visibility lets divers see unusually far. The lamps create temporary rooms of light inside darkness. The cold keeps the body alert. The line keeps the route home present, and every wall, arch, block, and crack reminds the diver that this is not scenery placed for comfort. It is a natural cave, old, soluble, flooded, and still changing slowly. A place like this does not need dramatic exaggeration. It is enough to describe it plainly. A gypsum cave near Orda. More than 5 kilometers of underwater passage. Clear cold water. White walls, large flooded galleries, narrow sections, muddy bottom areas, rockfall, light carried by divers into a space that otherwise remains dark. That plain description is already strange enough. No monsters required, no haunted music, just water, stone, cold, and the knowledge that in an overhead environment, the most beautiful view can never be allowed to distract from the way out. The deeper a diver moves into Orda's pale rooms, the more the cave's character becomes clear. It does not look like a typical flooded tunnel. It looks like a mineral landscape under glass, except the glass is water, and the person looking at it is inside the glass too. That is the uneasy part. The diver is not outside the exhibit. The diver is in it. Their bubbles touch the ceiling. Their fins hover above the floor. Their light travels across walls that may not have been seen by many human eyes. Their body heat slowly meets cold water through layers of protection. Their breathing makes a rhythm that belongs only to them and their equipment. And from there, with the village already far behind in the mind, the cave begins to teach the next lesson. Its beauty is not warm. Its clarity is not safety. Its pale light is not welcome in the human sense. It is simply the result of a place formed from soluble rock, filled with cold, transparent water and briefly lit by people careful enough to enter. The white corridors continue ahead, some wide enough to make a diver feel small, some narrow enough to make every movement matter, and the cold waits everywhere. Not as a sudden threat, but as a constant condition that slowly becomes part of every decision. The reason Orda Cave can look like another planet is not because it has anything supernatural hiding inside it. It is stranger than that, and more practical. It looks otherworldly because several real conditions happen together in one place. Pale gypsum walls, very clear water, huge submerged spaces, cold blue tones, and total darkness broken only by the lights carried by divers. Orda is a gypsum and anhydrite cave in Russia's Perm region, with a large underwater section and a reputation for white passages, wide halls, and exceptional visibility. Those simple ingredients are enough to make the cave look less like a place under a hill and more like a landscape that belongs somewhere far beyond normal human experience. Most of us are used to caves being brown, grey, damp and rough-looking. When someone says cave, the mind usually builds a picture from school trips, tourist paths, metal railings, uneven floors, and a guide reminding everyone not to touch the formations. There may be yellow lights fixed to the walls, there may be dripping water, there may be one person who keeps asking whether bats are nearby, even after being told twice that no, probably not. Orda does not fit that normal picture very well. Its famous underwater passages are pale, open, and cold-looking. The walls can appear almost white in a diver's light, and the water around them can take on blue shades because of the way light travels and fades underwater. UNESCO's coverage of Orda describes the effect of white gypsum walls and blue water as creating an unreal-looking scene, which is a plain way of saying that the cave does not look like the underground spaces most people imagine. That visual difference begins with the gypsum. Gypsum is not rare in ordinary life. Many people are surrounded by it every day in plaster, drywall and building materials. It is the sort of substance we usually associate with ceilings, offices and walls that someone has painted a colour called something like calm almond or winter fog. In Orda, the same broad mineral family becomes part of a submerged cave system. The rock is pale enough to reflect the beams from diving lights, and that reflection makes the cave appear larger and brighter than a darker cave might. The light does not simply stop at the nearest wall, it spreads across pale surfaces, catches edges, and returns to the diver in a soft, cold-looking brightness. This is very different from a cave made of darker limestone or volcanic rock. A dark wall absorbs more light. A pale wall gives more back. In open air, that difference might be pleasant but not shocking. Underwater, inside a cave, it changes everything. A diver carries lamps because there is no natural light inside the flooded passages. Without those lamps, Orda would be black. Not dim, not shadowy, but black in the direct physical sense. The whiteness of the gypsum only becomes visible when human light touches it. So the cave's planetary look is not permanent from a human point of view. It appears when the diver arrives, turns on a light, and for a short time creates a small moving zone of visibility inside the dark. That temporary visibility is part of the feeling. On the surface of Earth, landscapes are usually available, whether or not you brought a torch. A mountain remains visible in daylight. A forest shows itself when the sun rises. A beach does not need batteries. Orda's underwater spaces are different. They are there all the time, but their appearance as a white-blue world exists only when a trained person enters with lights. The rest of the time, the passages are still, dark, and unseen. That makes the images feel unusually private. A photograph from Orda is not like a photograph from a roadside viewpoint. It is proof that someone entered a difficult place, carried light into it, and came back with a view that the cave normally keeps to itself. The water clarity makes that view even more unusual. Many descriptions of Orda mention visibility of more than 40 metres, and some cite roughly 40 to 50 metres in good conditions. In ordinary underwater environments, visibility may be limited by plankton, mud, suspended particles, waves, current, or human activity. In a cave, visibility can also be ruined by silt. One careless fin kick near a fine bottom can turn clear water into a cloud. Orda's water is known for being remarkably clear, and this lets divers see across large spaces that would otherwise vanish into murk. That clarity can make the cave look almost weightless. Walls do not appear as close barriers. They appear as distant surfaces inside a blue-white volume. The effect on depth and distance can be strange. On land, we judge distance using familiar references: trees, doors, windows, furniture, road markings, the approximate size of someone walking nearby. Underwater in Orda, many of those references disappear. There are no trees, no furniture, no horizon, no sky, no floor in the ordinary sense, because the diver is not walking, the diver is floating. The usual clues that tell the brain how large a room is become weak or missing. A passage that is huge may not look huge until another diver appears inside it. A wall that seems close may be farther away than expected. An opening may seem easy to reach, but still take more swimming than the eyes predicted. This is one reason divers in photographs are so important for understanding Orda's scale. Without a person in the frame, a chamber might look like a small white corridor or an enormous submerged hall. The body gives the scene a measurement. A diver's fins, tanks, lights and bubbles make the cave legible. Suddenly the viewer sees that the white wall behind the diver is not a small feature, but a broad surface. The ceiling may be far above. The passage may continue beyond the light. The human figure turns the cave from a pattern of white and blue into a place with scale. It also makes the place feel less like a normal Earth environment, because the diver looks like an explorer moving through a space where walking is impossible. The absence of ordinary life adds to the another planet feeling. In a coral reef, even a very alien-looking reef, there are fish, plants, sponges, colours, motion, and signs that life is busy. Orda does not present itself that way in the famous images. It is mostly stone, water, light, and equipment. The setting looks clean, spare, and severe. There may be life in cave ecosystems in broader scientific terms, but the main visual impression for divers and viewers is not a crowded biological environment. It is a mineral environment. The cave does not greet the eye with animals or vegetation. It shows walls, cracks, blocks, arches, and blue darkness. That simplicity makes it feel less like a living landscape, and more like a place built from geology alone. The walls themselves are part of the effect because they do not always look smoothly carved. Orda's dive centre describes huge white tunnels, vertical cracks, windows in the walls, arches, underwater rock gardens, and unusual formations made of gypsum blocks. These shapes can look architectural, but not in a human way. A wall window may appear like an opening into another chamber. An arch may seem like a doorway. A vertical crack may look like a seam in the side of a huge structure. The mind tries to compare these shapes to buildings, corridors, rooms, and halls, because that is what we know. But the details do not behave like a building. They are irregular, broken, enlarged by water, and arranged by geology rather than design. That combination is powerful. When a natural place resembles architecture but not quite, it can feel uncanny. Orda's broad white passages sometimes look like hallways, but they are not hallways. The arches look like entrances, but no one built them. The walls look clean, but they were not polished for visitors. The result is a place that feels organised enough to be readable and wild enough to be unsettling. The brain looks for an explanation and does not find a familiar one quickly, so it reaches for the simple phrase, "another planet." The blue colour in many images comes from the water and the behaviour of light underwater. Water absorbs and scatters light differently than air, and colours change as distance and depth increase. Warm colours disappear more quickly, leaving cooler tones. In Orda, the diver's lamps strike white gypsum, and the surrounding water shifts the scene toward blue. That blue is not the bright holiday blue of a shallow tropical sea. It is colder, more muted, and more serious. It tells the viewer that this is not warm open water, is not somewhere to drift lazily above sand while thinking about lunch. Reports commonly place Orda's water temperature around 4 or 5 degrees Celsius, which means the visual coldness of the cave matches the physical coldness divers actually feel. Cold changes the mood of a place even before anyone says the number. A white underwater room at 26 degrees Celsius would feel very different from a white underwater room at 4 degrees. The mind reads cold through colour, clothing and context. Divers in Orda wear serious exposure protection, often dry suits and thermal layers, because this is not a place where ordinary wetsuit comfort is enough for long cave dives. The gear makes the divers look more like technical explorers than casual swimmers. Their bodies are wrapped, clipped, sealed, and weighted. Their lights are powerful. Their tanks and backup equipment make the scene look less like recreation and more like an expedition. That too adds to the feeling of another world. A human body must be modified by equipment before it can visit. There is also no surface overhead in the useful sense. In an open lake or sea, even if the water is cold, a diver may know that the surface is above. In Orda, the ceiling is rock. That changes the visual psychology. The diver is not just underwater. The diver is inside the earth and underwater at the same time. There is no sunlight above, no easy ascent, and no simple vertical escape. The environment surrounds the diver in every direction. White rock below, white rock beside, white rock above, with a route home marked by line rather than by the natural pull toward the surface. That is a very unusual way for a human being to occupy space. We are land animals. We like air above us, ground below us, and exits that do not require a detailed gas plan. Orda offers none of those comforts casually. This is why wide, clear passages can be both calming and intimidating. A large chamber may look gentle compared with a tight squeeze. There is space to move, room to turn, and enough visibility to see the walls. But large spaces can make the diver feel small and exposed. In a narrow cave, the danger is obvious because the rock is close. In a huge underwater hall, the danger can be quieter. The open space may invite relaxation, even though the diver is still under an overhead. The cave's size can hide the seriousness of the situation, because it does not always feel physically tight. It looks like there is freedom, but the freedom exists inside strict limits. The clarity of the water can also remove the normal feeling of enclosure. If a diver can see 40 meters ahead, the cave may not feel like a tunnel at first. It may feel open. But this is a visual impression, not a safety condition. The ceiling is still there. The distance to the exit still matters. Gas still runs down. Cold still works on the body. Lights can fail. Equipment can develop problems. The guideline still matters. Orda's otherworldly appearance can make people watching footage feel as if the cave is gentle because it is beautiful. Experienced cave divers know that beauty has no safety value by itself. The cave is not safer because it photographs well. Another reason Orda looks so unlike familiar places is the way bubbles behave. In open water, bubbles rise toward the surface and leave. In an underwater cave, bubbles rise until they meet the ceiling. They may slide along rock, collect in pockets, disturb fine material, or move in ways that remind the diver there is stone above. The Orda Dive Centre notes that exhaled air close to the gypsum can react with it and contribute to cloudiness, which means even breathing near the rock can affect what the diver sees. That is a very direct reminder that the human visitor changes the environment simply by being there. On another planet, an astronaut's suit separates the body from a hostile atmosphere. In Orda, diving equipment separates the body from water and cold, but the diver's own bubbles still interact with the cave. The cave's pale appearance also changes shadows. In a darker cave, a light may create a strong beam with blackness around it. In Orda, light spreads over white rock and can make shadows softer in some places, sharper in others. A crack may become a dark line cutting through a bright wall. An arch may glow on one edge and vanish on the far side. A diver's lamp may create the impression of rooms opening in layers. It is easy to understand why photographers are drawn to it. The cave gives strong contrast without needing bright colours. It has white walls, blue water, black equipment, and narrow beams of light. That is enough to create images that look clean and dramatic. Photographers associated with Orda Cave have helped shape the world's image of the place. The Orda Cave Awareness Project, led by underwater photographers and divers, documented the cave's huge underwater passages, low water temperature, and remarkable visibility. Other coverage notes that the cave became known for underwater photographic work, including spherical panoramas and major photographic projects that showed the cave to people who would never dive it themselves. These images matter because most people will only ever know Orda visually. They will not feel the cold water, manage the line, or hear their own breathing under the ceiling. They will see the white halls and blue shadows and think, understandably, that it looks like somewhere outside ordinary Earth. But a photograph can make a cave look stiller than it feels to the diver. In an image, everything is frozen. The diver, the bubbles, the beam of light, the wall, the open water. During the actual dive, the body is constantly making small corrections. Buoyancy changes with breathing. Fins move carefully. Hands check equipment. Eyes move between the line, teammates, pressure gauges, walls, and route. Even a calm diver is not motionless in the mental sense. The cave may look like a silent planet, but the diver is managing a continuous list of tasks. The otherworldly scene is held together by very earthly discipline. The phrase "another planet" also works because Orda removes many signs of weather. On the surface, weather gives a place its mood. Sun, wind, rain, snow, fog, heat, insects, leaves, dust. All of those details tell us we are in a familiar environment. Inside Orda's flooded passages, weather is far away. The cave has water temperature, visibility, flow conditions, and rock behaviour, but not weather in the usual human sense. There is no breeze, no sky, no clouds, no smell of grass, fuel, wood smoke, food, or rain on pavement. The senses are narrowed. Sight is limited to what the light reveals. Sound is mostly breathing and equipment. Touch is filtered through gloves, dry suit, hood, and water pressure. Smell is absent in the ordinary way because the diver is breathing from a cylinder. The human body receives a reduced, altered version of the world. That sensory reduction is one of the strongest reasons underwater caves feel alien. A person on land is constantly reading the environment through dozens of small cues. Underwater in a cave, many cues are missing or changed. Sound travels differently. Movement is slower. Weight feels different. Orientation can become less obvious. There may be no clear up or down beyond bubbles, depth instruments, and the diver's own sense of position. In a large white chamber, the bottom may be below, but the diver is not standing on it. The ceiling may be above, but touching it is a bad idea. The normal relationship between body and place is suspended. Orda's scale adds to that suspension. Sources describe the cave as having enormous underwater passage volumes and galleries stretching for kilometres. When a diver moves through large flooded halls, the body can feel almost detached from normal size. On land, a huge room still has a floor. You can walk across it and count your steps. Underwater, crossing space is not walking. It is controlled floating. The diver moves by fin strokes through cold water, with tanks and lights attached, while the walls slide by slowly. That movement is not like hiking, not like swimming in a pool, and not like flying. But people often compare it to flying because the body is suspended. It is its own kind of movement, and it suits a place that looks hard to classify. The cave also lacks the messy visual details of human life. No signs, no cables for tourists, no shop windows, no benches, no railings in the underwater sections. The guideline is there for diving safety, and equipment may mark the route, but the surrounding environment is not arranged for comfort. That gives the scene a clean, empty feeling. Humans are present, but not in charge. The cave is not adapted to people. People are adapted temporarily to the cave. This reversal makes the place feel remote even when it is physically under a region with roads and settlements above it. There is a practical danger in calling any cave another planet, because it can make the place sound like fantasy. Orda is not fantasy. It is a real cave, with real water, real rock, real temperatures, and real risks. It looks alien because real Earth processes have produced something unfamiliar to ordinary experience. That is an important difference. The cave does not need exaggeration. Its actual conditions are enough. White gypsum walls, clear water, 4 or 5 degree cold, long flooded passages, huge chambers, total darkness outside the lights, training required, no direct descent, a thin guideline leading home. The plain facts are already strong, and maybe that is the best way to understand its appearance. Orda looks like another planet because it removes the usual comforts by which we recognise our own. It has no sky, no weather, no open surface above, no plants, no warm light, no familiar sense of walking through space. It gives the eye white stone and blue water. It gives the body cold and pressure. It gives the mind distance, silence, and the awareness that the exit is behind, not above. Yet it is not distant in the cosmic sense. It is Earth, but Earth seen from inside one of its hidden rooms. That hidden room feeling becomes stronger the longer one imagines moving through it. The diver follows the line, the lamp beam travels ahead. The pale floor slopes or breaks into blocks. A wall opens into a window-like gap. Beyond it, another blue space appears. The water is so clear that the next chamber seems almost reachable by thought alone, but the diver knows better. Movement must stay slow. The cave's size must not become an invitation to hurry. The white walls reflect enough light to make the passage visible, but not enough to make it safe without judgment. Every beautiful feature is also part of an overhead environment that must be respected. This is where the fear of Orda is quietly connected to its appearance. If it looked ugly, cramped and muddy, fewer people would be tempted to go far. But Orda looks spacious and clean in many places. It rewards the eyes. It makes the next passage visible. It makes the world ahead look open. That is part of what makes it psychologically powerful. The cave does not frighten only through darkness. It also challenges through beauty. A diver must look at a scene that seems to say, "Come farther," while remembering the plan that says, "Turn when it is time." In a place like Orda, restraint is not the enemy of wonder. It is what makes wonder survivable. The more the light spreads over the gypsum, the more the cave seems to become a landscape rather than a tunnel. White shelves and blocks appear, cracks divide the walls, blue water fills the empty space. A teammate's light glows somewhere ahead or behind. Bubbles move upward until stone stops them. Nothing in that view resembles an ordinary room, but the mind still searches for room-like meanings. Hall, door, window, ceiling, floor, garden, cathedral, palace. These words help, but none of them fully fit because the place is not made for human categories. It is a cave, and it is underwater, and it is gypsum, and it is cold. That is enough. So when people say Orda looks like another planet, they are not only talking about appearance, they are talking about the feeling of being removed from ordinary reference points. The cave strips the world down to a few elements and makes those elements intense. Stone, water, light, air carried on the back, a line leading home, a body trying to stay warm, a mind trying to stay calm. The result is a place that can look peaceful in photographs, while still demanding full respect from anyone entering it. And as the pale corridors continue beyond the reach of the nearest lamp, the otherworldly beauty begins to reveal its harder side. A person can admire the white walls and the blue water, but admiration does not warm the hands, extend the gas supply, or shorten the way out. The cave's alien look is only the beginning of its seriousness. The next thing a diver must deal with is not the beauty of the place, but the cold that waits inside it, steady, physical, and patient enough to become part of every breath and every decision. The cold in Orda Cave is not a dramatic thing at first. It does not leap out. It does not roar. It does not announce itself like a storm at a window. It simply waits in the water, steady and complete, around 4 degrees Celsius according to dive site descriptions of the cave. That is cold enough to change the entire meaning of a dive, especially when the dive is not in open water, but under a ceiling of rock, inside long gypsum passages where the surface is not above you in any useful way. A person who has never been in water that cold might imagine it as just uncomfortable, a bit sharp, a bit bracing. The kind of cold that makes you say something brave and foolish, then step back out quickly while pretending you meant to do that. But cold water is not just a feeling. It is a condition that works on the body. It takes heat away far faster than cold air does. It reaches the hands, the face, the neck, and the small places where equipment does not seal perfectly. It makes simple movements slower. It makes fingers less precise. It turns small tasks into larger tasks, and in a cave, small tasks matter. In warm open water, a diver may feel relaxed enough to adjust a clip, check a gauge, clear a mask, or signal a teammate with a little effort. In Orda, the same actions take place inside water close to freezing, while wearing thick gloves, a hood, a dry suit, undergarments, heavy equipment, lights, reels, regulators, cylinders, and enough backup gear to make the diver look less like a swimmer and more like someone preparing to repair a submarine in winter. The gear is necessary, but it also adds complexity. A thick glove keeps the hand warmer, but it reduces touch. A dry suit protects the body, but it adds buoyancy that must be controlled. Extra equipment provides redundancy, but it also means more items to manage. Cold does not only chill the diver, it makes the whole dive more technical. That is why the cold in Orda is not separate from the fear people feel about the cave. The cave is long, flooded, and overhead. The water is clear and beautiful. The gypsum walls are pale. But the cold is the constant background pressure. It is there during the equipment check. It is there at the first entry. It is there while following the guideline. It is there during every breath, every hand signal, every turn, every pause. It does not need to become an emergency to influence the dive. It only needs to keep working slowly. Cold water has a way of making the body more honest. On land, a person can act calm while uncomfortable. They can laugh, shrug, and say they're fine. Underwater, inside a cave, the body gives clearer reports. Fingers grow clumsy, shoulders tighten, breathing may change. A diver may begin to use more gas because discomfort and effort affect breathing. A simple valve check may take longer than expected. A clip that usually opens easily may suddenly feel like a small mechanical puzzle invented by someone with a grudge. That is not because the diver has forgotten how to use equipment. It is because cold reduces performance, and performance is one of the things cave diving depends on. Research on cold water hand and forearm immersion has found that both fine and gross manual dexterity can become impaired quickly after exposure, which is exactly the kind of issue that matters when a diver must use clips, valves, reels, and lights with control. That may sound like a small laboratory detail, but in a cave it becomes practical. A cold hand is not just unpleasant. It may be slower to unclip a backup light. It may be less certain on a guideline. It may fumble with a bolt snap. It may struggle to feel the difference between one hose and another. The diver has training for these tasks, but the cold still takes a tax. And the tax is paid again and again. It is paid when putting on equipment before the dive. It is paid when entering the water. It is paid during the first minutes as the body adjusts. It is paid during the long middle part, when the excitement of entry has faded and the diver is simply inside the cave, managing the plan. It is paid near the end when fatigue may be higher and hands may be colder. The cold does not care that the diver is almost finished. It does not become kinder because the exit is near. It keeps taking heat until the diver is out, dry, and warming again. Dry suits are essential in conditions like Orda's, and dive descriptions of the site emphasise dry suits, proper training, and appropriate cave diving equipment because the water is so cold and the environment is so unforgiving. A dry suit is a remarkable piece of equipment. It keeps most of the diver's body separated from the water, holding a layer of air and insulation around them. But it is not magic. It must fit properly. It must seal at the neck and wrists. It must be managed during descent and ascent because the air inside changes volume with pressure. It can feel bulky. It can trap gas in inconvenient places. A diver must know how to control it calmly, because in a cave, buoyancy problems are not merely annoying. They can disturb silt, damage the environment, or create stress at exactly the wrong moment. Picture the diver at the edge of the water. They're already wearing layers. The undergarment adds warmth. The dry suit goes over it. The hood covers the head, because the head and neck lose heat quickly, and cold water on the face has a way of making a person reconsider every life choice that led to that moment. Thick gloves protect the hands, though never perfectly. Cylinders are clipped on. Lights are checked. Regulators are tested. Valves are confirmed. The line plan is reviewed. Nothing about this is casual. Even before entering the cave, the diver is carrying a small personal climate system, a breathing system, a navigation system, and enough backup systems to make sure one failure does not become the whole story. Then the water closes around them. The first contact with very cold water is often sharpest on the exposed parts of the face. Even with a hood, some skin is usually left to meet the water directly. The forehead, cheeks, lips, or the small area around the mask may feel the cold immediately. The body reacts. Breathing may want to change. The diver must keep it slow. Panic is not helpful anywhere, but in cave diving it is especially useless. So the trained response is not to fight the water, it is to settle, breathe, check, signal, confirm, begin. At Orda, the cold also shapes the rhythm of the dive. Divers cannot simply stay as long as curiosity asks them to stay. Time is limited by gas, by decompression obligations if relevant to the dive profile, by team planning, by equipment, and by thermal comfort. Cold water diving guidance often emphasises proper thermal protection, conservative planning, shorter exposures where appropriate, and warming breaks in harsh conditions. In Orda, that kind of planning is not a suggestion added for neatness. It is part of the reason the dive can be done at all. The cold affects the mind too, and this may be even more important than the cold affecting the hands. When a person becomes chilled, they may not think as clearly. Discomfort takes attention. The brain begins to divide itself between the task and the feeling. A warm, comfortable diver can devote more attention to the cave, the line, the team, and the plan. A cold diver may begin to think about being cold, then think about how long they have been cold, then think about whether they're colder than expected, and that thought can become a small noise in the mind. In a place like Orda, the mind should not be noisy. Professional diving discussions of cold exposure often warn that a drop in core temperature or near hypothermic state can affect dexterity and decision-making, and that reduced awareness can make divers slow to recognise the seriousness of their own condition. That last part matters. A cold diver may not always judge themselves accurately. They may feel stubborn. They may not want to be the person who calls the dive. They may think, just a little farther. But cave diving depends on calling the dive before conditions become bad. Turning back early is not embarrassment. It is competence with a pulse. The phrase, "the cold that waits in the dark," is useful because it reminds us that the cold is always there, whether or not the diver is thinking about it. The cave may be visually distracting. The white gypsum walls may reflect the light beautifully. The water may be so clear that the passage ahead looks gentle and open, but the temperature does not change because the view is impressive. The cold is not interested in how rare the cave is. It does not care that a photographer wants one more image, or that a diver has travelled a long way, or that the next chamber looks especially inviting. It remains physical and steady. This is one reason experienced divers build discipline around limits. A limit set before the dive is stronger than a decision made while cold, excited, tired, or impressed. The plan says where to turn. The gas rule says when to turn. The team agrees on signals. The equipment is arranged so that failures can be managed. The purpose of all this planning is not to remove risk completely, because that is not possible. The purpose is to keep decisions from being made by emotion inside a place where emotion is not a reliable guide. Orda's cold makes that discipline even more important. Cold also makes silence feel different. In warm water, silence can seem peaceful. In cold cave water, silence feels more serious. The diver hears breathing through the regulator. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Bubbles rise and find the ceiling. The dry suit shifts slightly. A fin moves. A teammate's light sweeps across pale rock. There is no wind, no bird call, no surface sound, no distant traffic from the village above. The cold removes any idea that the diver is simply drifting for pleasure. It makes the body aware of time. Time in cold water is measured differently. On land, 10 minutes can vanish while making tea or searching for a phone that is already in your hand. In Orda, 10 minutes is heat leaving the body, gas leaving the cylinder, and distance added to the return. The clock matters. The pressure gauge matters. The body matters. The cave may look motionless, but the dive is not motionless. Every minute changes the situation slightly. A good diver knows this. They do not wait until they feel bad to respond. They watch the plan before the body complains loudly. And the hands are often where the cold becomes most noticeable in practice. Hands do so many things in a cave dive. They hold the line when needed, they signal, they adjust lights, they manage reels, they check gauges, they touch valves, they operate inflators, they control clips, they communicate problems. If the fingers become stiff, the diver's world becomes smaller. They can still think clearly, but the body may not obey as smoothly. Thick gloves help, but thick gloves also make everything feel less precise. So divers train in the equipment they use. They practice until movements become familiar even through insulation. The goal is not elegance. The goal is reliable action when the water is doing its best to make hands into decorative objects. There is a kind of humility in that. Humans like to imagine that intelligence separates us from difficult environments, and it does, partly. We invent suits, regulators, lights, gauges, computers, reels, cylinders, and training systems. But the cold reminds us that the body is still the body. A person cannot argue with heat loss. They cannot negotiate with numb fingers. They cannot politely request that 4-degree water behave like a heated swimming pool. The body has requirements, and Orda makes those requirements plain. The cold also changes how far away the exit feels. Distance in a cave is never only distance. It is effort plus time plus conditions. A passage that felt manageable on the way in may feel longer on the way out if the diver is colder. This is not because the cave has changed shape, although in the mind it might feel that way. It is because the diver's comfort and reserves have changed. Good planning accounts for return conditions, not just entry excitement. The cave must be exited with enough warmth, gas, attention, and calm to manage problems if they happen near the end. This is why cave diving culture treats just keep going as a dangerous idea. The brave thing is often to stop. The skilled thing is often to turn. The mature thing is to leave a beautiful passage for another day, or for another team, or for no one at all. Order will not disappear because a diver turns back. The white walls will remain. The cold water will remain. The cave will wait, as caves are very good at waiting. A human body, however, is not a cave. It has limits. It needs warmth, oxygen, and a way home. Even the preparation after the dive is shaped by the cold. Exiting freezing water is not the end of the body's response. Equipment must be removed. Hands may be clumsy. Zippers, clips, and seals still need attention. The diver must warm up properly. On a cold day, the surface environment may not feel especially welcoming either. The village above may have weather of its own, and Russia's Perm region is not exactly famous for behaving like a tropical spa. The cold does not politely stop at the waterline. It follows the diver into the exit routine, into the changing area, into the careful process of getting dry and warm again. This is part of what separates Orda from warm water cave sites. There are caves in the world where the main psychological pressure may be darkness, restriction, flow, depth, or navigation, while the water itself is relatively comfortable. Orda adds cold as a major character. It is not just a setting, it is an active condition. It shapes the equipment list, the dive plan, the length of exposure, the level of training, and the margin for error. A diver who is comfortable in a warm cave may still need specific preparation for a place like Orda, because cold water changes the practical reality of every skill. The cold can also make the cave feel cleaner and sharper in memory. People often remember cold environments vividly. A winter morning, a frozen handrail, the sting of air in the nose, the first step into icy water. Orda's whiteness and coldness reinforce each other. The pale gypsum looks like it belongs with low temperature. The blue water looks like it should be cold. The divers' heavy suits confirm it. Nothing in the scene suggests softness. Even the beauty has edges. Still, the cold is not only an enemy. It is also part of what preserves the cave's character in the imagination. A warm Orda would feel like a different place. The cold gives it seriousness. It slows the diver down. It demands better preparation. It removes casualness. It turns the dive into something deliberate. In that sense, the cold is one of the cave's teachers. Not a kind teacher exactly. More like a teacher who says very little, but notices everything. And like many strict teachers, it rewards those who prepare properly. A well-equipped, well-trained diver in Orda can experience the cave in a way that looks almost peaceful. They move slowly through white passages, their lights shine across gypsum walls. Their breathing remains controlled, their team stays together, the line remains in sight or in touch. The cold is present, but managed. It becomes part of the dive, not the whole dive. That is the goal. Not to defeat the cold, because the cold is not competing. The goal is to respect it enough that it does not become the story. For the listener imagining the cave from a warm bed, this may be the most comfortable way to visit. There is no need to feel 4-degree water on the cheeks or wrestle with thick gloves around a stubborn clip. No need to calculate gas while floating under stone. No need to wonder whether your hands are colder than they should be. Here, the cold can be understood from a distance. It can be pictured as part of the cave's identity, steady and patient, waiting in every corridor, touching every surface, filling every silence. A diver moving deeper into Orda carries warmth as a limited resource, just as surely as they carry breathing gas and battery power. That thought is simple, and it changes the mood of the place. The cave is not only asking, can you find the way? It is also asking, can you function while cold? Can you think clearly? Can you signal calmly? Can you turn back on time? Can you manage a problem with hands that may not feel as quick as they did at the surface? Can you resist the invitation of one more white passage when the body has already begun to spend its heat? The cold makes Orda honest. It strips away the fantasy that beautiful places are automatically gentle. It reminds the diver that the cave is not a picture, not a dream, not a scene arranged for human comfort. It is a flooded gypsum system in dark underground space, filled with water cold enough to demand respect from the first moment to the last. Its beauty can be filmed, photographed, described and admired. But anyone who enters it must also deal with the temperature, because the temperature is not decoration, it is one of the rules. And once the cold is understood, another part of Orda becomes clearer. The fear is not only about the temperature, or the darkness, or even the rock overhead. It is about how these things combine over distance. A cold room is uncomfortable. A dark room is unsettling. A long hallway can be tiring. Put them together underwater, beneath stone, inside a cave where the path home must be followed with care, and the meaning changes completely. The cold waits in the dark, yes, but it does not wait alone. It waits inside corridors that continue farther than the mind expects, through pale passages where every turn forward must be remembered as part of the return. The distance inside Orda Cave is one of the reasons divers speak about it with respect. Not distance in the normal surface sense, where a long corridor simply means more walking, a bit of tiredness, and perhaps a complaint about whoever designed the building. In Orda, distance is underwater, under rock, in cold water, inside a cave system where the path home is not above you, but behind you, along a route that must be followed with care. The cave is described by its own dive information as Russia's longest underwater labyrinth of corridors and chambers, and other dive site descriptions emphasize its massive white gypsum passages, cold water, and visibility that can exceed 40 meters when conditions are good. That word, labyrinth, is not just there for atmosphere. It describes a real problem. A labyrinth is not frightening because every path is narrow or every wall is dark. A labyrinth is frightening because the relationship between forward and back becomes complicated. One turn seems simple, 2 turns are still manageable. Several turns, a change in depth, a side passage, a wide room, a low area, a second line, a moment of lost focus, and suddenly the mind has to work harder to keep the route organised. On land, if you become turned around in a building, you can usually stop, think, follow signs, call someone, or open a door. In a flooded cave, there is no casual pause outside the rules. You can stop moving, yes, but you're still breathing from finite gas, still getting colder, still under rock, and still dependent on the planned route out. This is where Orda's endless-looking corridors become serious. They are not endless in the literal sense. The cave has surveyed lengths, known passages, named areas, maps, and routes explored by trained divers. But from the diver's point of view inside the water, a long passage can feel as though it continues far beyond normal human scale. The light reaches ahead. White gypsum walls reflect it back. The water is clear enough to show the passage extending forward. The line runs on. Another section appears, then another. The cave does not need to be infinite to feel like it is testing the diver's sense of return. One especially notable route is the Moscow Passage, described by UNESCO-related coverage as the longest flooded tunnel in Russia and the CIS, with a length of 935 meters. The same source notes that the main underwater galleries are named after the hometowns of divers who explored the cave during all Russian expeditions, including Chelyabinsk, Krasnoyarsk, Moscow and Sverdlovsk passages. Names like that are useful because they make a hidden place easier to discuss. They turn unknown spaces into routes people can plan, survey and remember. But a name does not make a passage short. A name does not remove the need for gas planning. A name does not turn a flooded tunnel into a hallway at a train station with a helpful sign saying, "Exit this way," and perhaps buy a pastry. To understand why long corridors matter so much, imagine entering a passage that is clear, pale, and calm. The first few meters feel controlled. The entrance is known, the line is visible. Your teammate's light is nearby. The walls are bright in the beam. Then the passage continues. You check your gas. You check your depth. You check your position. You continue. Nothing dramatic happens. That is important. Fear in Orda does not always arrive as a sudden event. It can arrive as arithmetic. How far in? How much gas used? How cold are the hands? How long to return? Is the team still tight? Is the line where it should be? Is the visibility still as good behind as it is ahead? The strange part is that the cave may look peaceful, while these questions become more important. A narrow, muddy cave looks dangerous in a way almost anyone can understand. Order can look almost comfortable in some images, because the water is so clear and the passages are so broad. But cave divers know that the broad, beautiful route can be deceptive. A wide corridor still has a ceiling. A bright wall still blocks a direct descent. A clear passage still becomes a problem if the diver loses the line, loses a light, mismanages gas, becomes too cold, or allows stress to make decisions. The cave does not become safe because it is photogenic, it only becomes visible. Distance underwater also changes because movement is slow and deliberate. On land, if a corridor is long, you can walk faster. In a cave, moving faster can be exactly the wrong answer. Fast finning can disturb the bottom. Quick turns can create contact with walls or ceiling. A careless movement can stir material into the water. Orda's visibility is famous, but the cave itself notes that careful movement is part of maintaining that visibility, with depths generally around 15 to 18 metres and maximum known cave depths around 20 metres in the described diving areas. This is why a diver does not simply rush through the distance. The corridor must be travelled with control. That control takes mental energy. It may look effortless in video because a skilled cave diver moves smoothly. The body remains horizontal. The fins use careful techniques to avoid pushing water downward into the bottom. The hands stay quiet unless needed. The light beam moves with purpose. The diver does not bounce from floor to ceiling like a confused shopping trolley. That smoothness is the product of training. It is how the diver preserves the cave, preserves visibility, and preserves calm. But maintaining that calm over long corridors requires attention, and attention, like warmth and gas, is a resource. This is one reason divers fear long passageways. The passage itself may not be tight, it may not be deep, it may not even be visually confusing at first. The fear comes from how much must remain correct for the entire route. A short mistake in open water can often be corrected by ascending, stopping, or surfacing. A mistake far inside a cave must be solved inside the cave. If a diver is hundreds of meters from the entrance, every problem becomes a travel problem too. A failed light is not only a failed light, it is a failed light that must be handled while exiting a long route. A gas sharing situation is not only sharing gas, it's sharing gas while moving along a guideline through cold water and passage geometry. A loss of visibility is not only murk, it is murk between the team and the exit. The guideline is central to this entire fear. In cave diving training standards, maintaining a continuous guideline to a safe exit is treated as a core requirement, because the line is the physical route back through an overhead environment. This may sound simple, almost too simple, until you imagine what happens without it. In clear water, the diver can see the corridor. In a silt out, the diver may see almost nothing. In clear water, a turn may look obvious. In darkness or stress, that same turn may not feel obvious at all. The line removes debate. It does not ask the diver to remember every wall shape. It gives the hand something real to follow. There is a quiet comfort in a guideline, but also a quiet warning. A thin line in a huge cave is a humbling object. It looks too small for the job it has. It may run along a wall, across a room, through a passage, past rock features and into another section. It can be followed visually when conditions are good, or by touch when conditions are poor. It is not dramatic. It does not glow by itself unless marked or illuminated. It does not make a heroic sound. It simply sits there, carrying the most important information in the cave, the way out. The longer the corridor, the more that line matters. At the start of a dive, the line feels like a reference. Farther in, it becomes a commitment. A diver who has followed it into the cave must follow it out. Side passages may appear. The cave may open into large chambers. The white gypsum may reflect light in ways that make one opening resemble another. Clear water may make distant spaces tempting. But the line is the route chosen by the plan. Leaving it without the correct training, equipment and procedure is not curiosity. It is a mistake dressed up as curiosity, and mistakes are much less charming underwater. Gas planning is the other main reason distance becomes fear. In cave diving, breathing gas is not simply the air needed to continue enjoying the dive. It is the air needed to enter, exit, and handle problems. Common cave diving gas management uses conservative reserve planning, often described through the rule of thirds: one portion for penetration, one for exit, and one kept for emergencies, with adaptations depending on equipment, team, and dive plan. A corridor that appears to continue forever is not judged by appearance. It is judged by gas. The pressure gauge says what curiosity is allowed to do. That can be psychologically difficult. The passage ahead may still look open. The diver may feel fine. The team may be moving well. The cave may be at its most beautiful just beyond the current point. But if the gas plan says turn, the dive turns. This is not a matter of mood. It is arithmetic again. Gas used on the way in must be available on the way out, with enough reserve for emergencies. The farther the diver travels into the corridor, the more expensive the return becomes. There is no discount for confidence, no loyalty points for experience. The cave does not say, "You've been very responsible today, so here is a little extra breathing gas." The cylinders contain what they contain. Long corridors also affect time. Even when a diver is not deep enough to accumulate serious decompression obligations on a particular route, time still matters because of cold, gas, fatigue, and attention. Orda's known underwater passages are often described as relatively shallow for cave diving, with many areas around 15 to 18 metres and a maximum of about 20 metres in the known underwater passages. But shallow does not mean easy when the route is long, cold, and overhead. That is an important distinction. People often think depth is the main danger in diving. Depth matters, of course, but in a cave, distance from the exit can matter just as much, and sometimes more, to the feeling of the dive. A diver 20 metres deep in open water may be able to look up and know the surface is there. A diver 15 metres deep inside a long cave passage cannot simply ascend to safety. The roof is rock. The exit is behind. The route may be long. That changes the emotional meaning of depth. The numbers may look modest on paper, but the overhead environment changes them. It is not the vertical distance alone that matters. It is the route distance. It is the need to return through the same controlled path while managing all the conditions that were present on the way in and any new problems that have appeared since. This is why long underwater corridors can become a mental test. The cave asks the diver to remain calm in a setting that gives no quick escape. Calm at the entrance is useful, but calm far inside matters more. Anyone can feel steady at the beginning, when the exit is nearby and everything is fresh. Farther in, the diver has to carry that steadiness with them. It must survive the cold. It must survive the sight of the corridor continuing. It must survive small frustrations. It must survive the knowledge that the return is not optional and not instant. Disorientation can happen even in good visibility, because underwater caves are three-dimensional spaces. Passages slope, widen, split, drop, rise, and reconnect. The body is floating rather than walking, so the normal sense of floor and path may weaken. A diver may pass through a large room where the line cuts across space and the walls are distant. Another diver's light may appear at an angle that changes the sense of direction. Bubbles rise to the ceiling and show which way is up, but up is not the way out. Up is just rock. This is one of the most important mental adjustments in cave diving. The body's old habit says that upward means safety. The cave says that the route means safety. That old habit is hard to ignore. Humans are surface creatures. We understand exits, doors, air, stairs, windows, and sky. An underwater cave removes or changes almost all of those references. The corridor ahead may look like a hallway, but it is not a hallway. The ceiling may look high, but it is still a barrier. A side opening may look like a door, but it may not lead where the diver needs to go. The light may make the passage look simple, but light only shows surfaces. It does not explain the route unless the diver has the line, the map, the training and the discipline to use them. Long corridors also create a special kind of silence. In a small room, silence has edges. In a long underwater passage, silence seems to extend with the route. The diver hears breathing. The regulator gives a steady mechanical comfort. Inhale, exhale. The sound of bubbles moves upward and away until the ceiling stops them. Teammates communicate with light and hand signals, not conversation. There is no casual voice saying, "this way," or "I think we missed the turn," or "did anyone bring snacks?" The ordinary social tools are gone. Communication becomes simple and precise, and that precision must be enough. The fear is not always panic. Often it is respect felt in the body. It is the awareness that the corridor continues, and the exit is now far enough away to be meaningful. It is the knowledge that the team must not lose the line. It is the habit of checking gas before curiosity has a chance to make a speech. It is the small mental note that every beautiful passage ahead has a cost behind it. That kind of fear is useful. It keeps the diver from treating the cave like a sightseeing tunnel. It turns attention back to the plan. For some divers, Orda's long corridors are also part of the attraction. This may sound contradictory, but it is very human. The same quality that creates fear also creates fascination. A short cave can be beautiful, but a long flooded labyrinth gives a sense of exploration that is difficult to find elsewhere. The corridor continues. The light reaches forward. The white rock opens into another room. The diver moves carefully, knowing that very few people will ever see this place directly. The appeal is not recklessness. For serious cave divers, the appeal is controlled access to a difficult environment. It is the satisfaction of planning well, moving well, and seeing a place that demands both skill and restraint. Still, the cave does not care about the diver's feelings. That may be the most useful sentence in any discussion of order. The cave does not care if a diver is excited, nervous, experienced, proud, tired, or eager to make one more turn. It does not care whether the camera is almost ready, whether the last shot was slightly out of focus, or whether the next corridor looks better than the last one. The cave remains a flooded system of gypsum passages under rock. The diver's job is to behave according to that reality. The corridors can also produce a subtle problem of scale. Because the water is so clear, a diver can see far enough that the next feature seems manageable. The next arch, the next bend, the next widening, the next pale wall. It can feel as if progress is made in small, harmless steps. Just a little farther, then a little farther again. But caves are entered cumulatively. Each small decision adds distance. Each extra section adds return time. Each new turn adds complexity. A diver does not suddenly become far inside the cave all at once. They become far inside by continuing. That is a quiet lesson, and not only for diving. Many serious situations do not begin with one obviously bad choice. They begin with a series of small choices that each seem reasonable by themselves. In a cave, training is designed to interrupt that pattern. The turn point is decided before the mind starts bargaining. The gas plan sets a boundary. The team plan sets a boundary. The line procedure sets a boundary. The cave's beauty may invite, but the plan answers. In order, some passages are wide enough that the diver may not feel squeezed, and that can make the distance feel less threatening at first. A tight restriction tells the body immediately that the cave is serious. A broad white corridor may allow the diver to relax, but relaxation must not become looseness. A wide passage can still contain navigation challenges. A large room can still make it harder to judge direction. A white wall can still be confused with another white wall if the diver loses orientation. The cave's spaciousness is part of its beauty, but it is not permission to stop thinking. There are also narrow sections, and those change the mood quickly. Orda's descriptions include not only huge tunnels and rooms, but also areas where passages narrow between rock, including a section known as Mousetrap. A name like that does not require much explanation. Even without dramatizing it, the thought of moving through a squeezed underwater space inside a cold cave is enough to make most people appreciate their current relationship with air and furniture. For divers, restrictions demand equipment awareness, body control, and calm movement. In a long cave, the mix of broad rooms and narrower sections adds variety, but also adds decision points. The fear of endless corridors is also connected to memory. On the way in, a diver observes the route, but the route may look different on the way out. Lights face the other direction. The walls are seen from another angle. A feature that seemed obvious while entering may be less obvious while leaving. In clear water, this is manageable with line and training. In reduced visibility, memory alone is not enough. The line becomes the reliable memory of the cave. It does not get nervous. It does not forget turns. It does not argue with itself. It simply leads. When people hear about cave diving accidents in general, they often imagine one dramatic failure. A tank emptying instantly, a roof collapse, a monster-sized current. Those are possible hazards in different environments, but many cave diving risks come from combinations. Poor gas management plus distance, loss of line plus darkness, bad buoyancy plus silt, cold plus stress, overconfidence plus a beautiful passage. Orda's corridors concentrate some of those combinations because the cave is long, cold, visually tempting, and overhead. The fear divers feel is not superstition. It is an understanding of combinations. That understanding changes how a good team moves. They do not just swim forward, they monitor each other. Lights are used not only to see, but to communicate. The team keeps spacing appropriate for the passage. They avoid stirring silt. They check gas. They know when to turn. They keep the line within the plan. If something small goes wrong, they handle it before it becomes large. The corridor may continue, but the team's discipline decides how far they continue with it. There is a particular seriousness in the return phase. Turning around can feel like relief, but it is not the end of the dive. The return is the part that brings the diver home, and it must be done with the same care as entry. In some ways, the return is when discipline matters most, because the diver may be colder, more tired, and mentally ready to be done. The passage that seemed fascinating on the way in may feel longer on the way out. The exit may feel near before it is actually near. That feeling must be managed. The cave is exited meter by meter, not by wishing. And then there is the psychological effect of knowing that the corridor behind you is long. While moving forward, the diver is building a debt. Not a moral debt, not a dramatic one, just a practical debt of distance. Every meter in must be paid back with a meter out. In open water, the route home can be simpler. In Orda, the route home is the corridor behind, and the corridor behind may include turns, rooms, restrictions, and cold water already travelled once. The diver must have enough gas, warmth, light, and calm to pay that debt completely. This is why the phrase, endless corridors, fits the diver's fear even when the cave is measured. It is not about literal infinity. It is about the feeling created by distance under constraints. The passage continues beyond the light. The line continues. The water remains cold. The ceiling remains overhead. The exit remains behind. The mind understands that there is a known way out, but it also understands that the way out must be physically reached. That distance between knowing and reaching is where fear can live. A trained diver does not try to erase that fear. They use it. Fear becomes part of the checklist in a way. Not panic, not imagination running wild, but awareness. The corridor is long, so gas matters. The cave is overhead, so the line matters. The water is cold, so exposure time matters. The passages are beautiful, so restraint matters. The visibility is excellent, so do not let it create overconfidence. The team is prepared, so stay prepared. The route is known, so follow it. For those of us only listening, safe on the surface, the idea of those corridors can be strangely calming because we are not in them. We can picture the white passage ahead, the lamp beam travelling over gypsum, the slow movement of divers, the guide line running through cold water. We can understand the seriousness without needing to feel the pressure of it in our own bodies. We can let the cave remain far away, which is a very sensible arrangement for bedtime. The divers who enter Orda do not have that distance. They must keep the real distance measured, managed, and respected. As the corridor stretches on, the cave teaches a lesson that is simple and hard at the same time. Going farther is easy in the moment. Returning safely is the real measure. The passage ahead may be clear. The walls may glow in the lights. The water may reveal more than most caves would ever show. But the diver's attention keeps returning to the same practical facts. Line, gas, cold, team, route, exit. These are not interruptions to the experience. They are the structure that allows the experience to happen. And somewhere in that long white underwater system, the thin guideline keeps doing its quiet work. It runs through spaces that can look open enough to invite confidence and complex enough to punish confusion. It crosses the distance between wonder and safety. It gives the diver a way to move through the fear without pretending the fear is not there. The corridors may seem endless, but the line gives them direction. And once that is understood, the next part of the story becomes clear. Because in Orda Cave, survival does not depend on courage alone. It depends on the small, practical systems divers trust when the cave becomes too large, too cold, or too dark for memory to be enough. Inside Orda Cave, the most important object may not look important at all. It is not the brightest light, the thickest dry suit, the most expensive regulator, or the camera that makes the cave look like a white underwater cathedral. It is a line, a thin guideline running through cold water, tied and placed so that a diver can follow it back toward the entrance. In a cave like Orda, where the flooded passages continue through pale gypsum, and the surface is not directly above, that line becomes more than equipment. It becomes the physical route home. This is one of the great differences between open water diving and cave diving. In open water, even if something goes wrong, the surface is usually a direction. Up. Not always simple, not always immediate, and certainly not something to do carelessly, but still a direction the body understands. In a cave, up may only lead to rock. The exit may be behind you, around a bend, through a chamber, across a restriction, and along a path that must be followed exactly. That is why cave diving standards place such strong emphasis on maintaining a continuous guideline to a safe exit. The NSS-CDS standards, for example, state that students are to maintain a continuous guideline to a safe exit during all training dives. A guideline looks almost too fragile for the responsibility it carries. It may be only a narrow cord in a huge flooded room. It may run beside a wall, across open space, through a passage, or along a route that has been travelled and marked by trained divers before. When visibility is clear, the line may seem almost unnecessary to the untrained eye. After all, the cave is visible, the walls are visible, the passage ahead is visible. But visibility is a condition, not a promise. It can change. A diver can stir the floor, a teammate can disturb sediment, bubbles can affect the ceiling. A small mistake can turn a clear passage into a cloudy one, and if the lights fail, the cave does not become dim. It becomes completely without natural light. That is difficult to imagine from a comfortable room. Darkness in a house is usually soft around the edges. There may be a street lamp outside, a phone screen on a table, a gap under a door, or the familiar outline of furniture waiting to bruise your shin with unnecessary enthusiasm. In a flooded cave without a working light, there is no glow for the eyes to adjust to. There is no horizon, no window, no moon, no helpful refrigerator light, quietly doing more than its share for civilization. There is only absence of light. In that situation, the guideline is no longer something you look at. It is something you feel. Hand to line, line to exit, exit to air. This is why cave divers practice line skills until they become calm, automatic, and boring in the best possible way. Boring is underrated in dangerous environments. Boring means the skill is there when the mind is busy. Boring means a hand can find the line without drama. Boring means a lost light drill is not a terrifying novelty, but a procedure that has been done before. A cave diver does not want their first serious line problem to happen deep inside a cold gypsum passage while their brain is saying several unhelpful things at once. Order makes the line especially meaningful because the cave can feel spacious. Some parts are wide, white, and clear. The water can reveal far ahead. A diver may be able to see huge pale surfaces, openings, arches, and corridors continuing into blue distance. This can make the environment feel open, almost generous. But that is a visual feeling, not a safety rule. The route home is still specific. In a large chamber, the line may be the only thing that turns open space into a known path. Without it, a wide room can become more confusing than a narrow tunnel because there are fewer close walls to guide the eye. A person can get lost in space as easily as in restriction. The line is also a reminder of humility. It says very quietly that memory is not enough. A diver may remember the route well in calm conditions. They may remember a white arch, a dark crack, a sloping floor, a particular turn. But the cave can look different on the way out. Lights face another direction. The team is colder. The diver may be more tired. Visibility may be worse. Stress can make familiar shapes feel unfamiliar. The guideline does not depend on mood. It does not become confused because the diver is cold. It does not try to guess. It simply leads back. Air tanks, or more properly breathing gas cylinders, carry another part of the same fragile logic. A diver in Orda is not breathing from the cave. The cave has no air to offer in its flooded sections. Every breath is carried in on the diver's back or side, stored under pressure, planned before the dive, watched during the dive, and protected as a limited resource. This sounds obvious, but the meaning changes inside an overhead environment. In open water, low gas is serious. In a cave, low gas can become fatal because leaving is not immediate. The exit has distance. This is why gas planning in cave diving is conservative. Many cave divers use the rule of thirds, 1/3 of the gas supply for entering, 1/3 for exiting, and 1/3 held in reserve for contingencies. Divers Alert Network describes this as common cave diving practice and emphasizes that leaving a significant reserve matters because unexpected circumstances can happen before a diver reaches the exit. Global Underwater Explorers. Cave Diver Level 2 standards similarly state that a maximum of 1/3 of total gas supply can be used for cave penetration during those training dives. That rule may sound simple enough to fit on a napkin, which is often a sign of a useful rule. But simple does not mean casual. The numbers must be checked. The team must communicate. The gas supply must match the plan, the route, the cold, the workload, and the possibility that someone else may need help. A diver does not enter a long corridor thinking only about their own normal breathing rate on a perfect day. They plan for the day becoming less perfect, a regulator problem, a teammate needing gas, a delay, reduced visibility, stress, cold hands, a slower exit. The reserve is not decorative. It is there because caves do not become easier when something goes wrong. In Orda, the cold adds another layer to gas planning. Cold water can increase discomfort, effort, and breathing rate. It can make small tasks take longer. A diver who expected calm breathing may breathe more heavily if they become chilled or stressed. Thick gloves may make equipment handling slower. A line issue may take longer to solve. These are exactly the kinds of reasons a reserve exists. Breathing gas is not just for the dive that goes beautifully. It is for the dive that becomes inconvenient, awkward, and quietly serious. There is something almost severe about the arithmetic of it. The cave ahead may look inviting. The white passage may continue. A photographer may want one more shot. A diver may feel strong and focused. But the pressure gauge is not impressed. It gives a number, and that number has authority. The plan may say turn, and if the plan says turn, the cave must be left for another day. A person can argue with themselves. They can try to bargain with curiosity. They can say, just a little farther, which is perhaps one of the most dangerous phrases in any difficult place. But the gas plan is there to end the argument. This is another reason experienced divers often seem calm from the outside. They are not calm because the cave is harmless. They are calm because they have turned danger into procedures. Guideline, gas, lights, team, communication, buoyancy, propulsion, exit plan. Each part reduces uncertainty. None removes risk entirely. But together, they create a structure strong enough for a trained person to visit a place that would otherwise be completely unsuitable for the human body. Lights are part of that structure too. A cave diver does not rely on one light. Redundancy is central to cave diving because a single failure should not become an emergency by itself. Recent expert commentary on cave diving safety has described a 3-light minimum rule and broader redundancy. Multiple tanks, regulators, computers, writing devices, and other backup systems for critical functions. That may sound excessive until the cave is imagined properly. In a flooded passage with no natural light, a failed primary light is not like a lamp going out in a bedroom. It removes the main visual connection to the environment. Backup lights are not luxuries. They are exits in battery form. Even then, lights do not replace the guideline. A powerful lamp can show the wall ahead, but it cannot guarantee that the wall ahead leads out. Light reveals, the line directs. The two work together, but they are not the same tool. This is important because a bright cave dive can fool the imagination. In photographs of Orda, the diver's lamps make the cave look almost luminous, but every glowing image depends on equipment functioning correctly. Without lights, those same white walls vanish into black water. The cave does not have a dim setting. It has human light, or it has none. The tanks, lights, and line all share the same basic message. Do not trust one thing alone. Do not trust sight alone. Do not trust memory alone. Do not trust one lamp alone. Do not trust normal breathing alone. Do not trust confidence alone. Confidence is pleasant, but in Orda Cave, confidence without backup is only a mood. Equipment redundancy is the practical answer to the fact that machines can fail, humans can make mistakes, and caves do not provide easy exits. The team itself is another form of redundancy. Cave divers do not simply swim near one another like tourists looking at fish. They keep awareness of position, lights, signals, gas, and route. They know where each person is in relation to the line and the exit. They communicate with hand signals and light signals because speech is unavailable. A small beam movement can carry meaning. A hand can ask for a gas check. A light can request attention. A teammate's position can show whether the group is organised or becoming sloppy. In a cave, sloppy has a way of becoming expensive. This does not mean cave divers move like robots. They are still people. They feel awe, discomfort, curiosity, irritation, and perhaps the occasional private thought that a certain clip was designed by someone who disliked fingers. But the dive works because personal feelings are kept inside a framework. The framework matters more than the mood. A diver may be amazed by the view, but they still check gas. A diver may want to continue, but they still follow the turn pressure. A diver may feel relaxed, but they still stay aware of the line. The cave allows no useful separation between beauty and discipline. In Orda, where the water is clear and the gypsum reflects light, the line may sometimes be easy to see. That ease is helpful, but it can also make the line feel less urgent to someone who does not understand cave diving. The danger is not the normal moment when everything is visible and calm. The danger is the abnormal moment. A silt out, a failed light, a stressed diver, a broken or displaced reference, a clouded passage, a lost teammate, a cold hand fumbling for equipment. The guideline exists for the moment when the cave stops looking like the photograph. That fragile thread also carries a psychological comfort that is hard to overstate. A diver far inside a cave knows that the exit is not visible. They know they cannot swim upward to open air. They know the route behind them has length. But they also know there is a line. That knowledge steadies the mind. It reduces the cave from an unknown volume to a route. It gives the diver something definite in a place where the senses can be misleading. Even when the passage looks enormous, the line makes it navigable. And yet the line must be respected physically. It can be damaged, pulled, trapped, or confused if handled badly. Divers must avoid entanglement. They must avoid careless contact. They must understand tie-offs, jumps, gaps, and navigation procedures appropriate to their training. This is not material for improvisation. Cave diving courses spend time on these skills because the line is only helpful if the diver knows how to use it. A person who treats the guideline as a casual handrail has misunderstood it. It is not there to drag the body through the cave. It is there to preserve orientation. Air tanks carry a different kind of comfort. They turn time into numbers. That may not sound comforting, but it is. A pressure gauge tells the diver what remains. It takes vague worry and makes it measurable. Without measurement, a diver might rely on feeling, and feeling is unreliable. A relaxed diver may underestimate gas use. A stressed diver may over-focus on it. A gauge gives a fact. The fact may be good news or bad news, but it is usable. Cave diving depends on usable facts. This is why the pre-dive check is not merely a ritual. It is the surface rehearsal of survival systems. Valves open, regulators breathe, lights switch on. Backup lights are present. Cylinders are full enough for the plan. The guideline plan is understood. Each diver knows signals. Each diver knows the turn conditions. Each diver knows that any team member can call the dive at any time for any reason, and the correct response is not argument. The correct response is exit. That culture matters. It prevents pride from getting a vote. Pride is not a good cave diving tool. It is too noisy. It wants to explain, continue, justify, and impress. Orda Cave has no use for it. The cave rewards the opposite qualities: patience, accuracy, caution, clear thinking, and the willingness to leave. This is why the systems divers carry are humble things: a line, a gauge, a backup light, a regulator, a slate, a simple signal. None of them is glamorous compared with the glowing white walls of the cave, but they are what make the glowing white walls survivable. There is also the matter of touch. In clear water, cave diving may look visual, but touch remains essential. A diver may need to find the line by hand. They may need to operate equipment without looking directly at it. They may need to feel a clip open, feel a valve position, feel the tension of a line, feel a teammate's contact in zero visibility. Cold water makes touch less sensitive, and gloves reduce it further. So the diver practices until the body knows the equipment. The equipment must be placed consistently. Backup lights must be where the hand expects them. Cutting tools, reels, gauges, inflators, and regulators must not become mysteries at the wrong time. This is another quiet difference between recreational comfort and technical preparation. In ordinary life, if you cannot find something in a pocket, you can look, sigh, and search again. In a cave, blind familiarity matters. A diver should not have to wonder where the backup light is. They should not have to invent a procedure while cold and stressed. They should already know. The cave is not the place to learn that your equipment arrangement makes no sense. It is better to discover that somewhere less dramatic, preferably while standing upright and near T. The fragile thread home is not only the guideline then, it is the whole chain of preparation. The guideline is one thread. Gas planning is another. Lights are another. Teamwork is another. Training is another. Equipment placement, communication, buoyancy, propulsion, thermal protection, and decision-making all twist together. Any single thread may seem small, but together they form the system that lets a diver enter an overhead environment and return. Orda Cave makes that system visible because the environment is so clean and severe. There is little clutter in the famous images to distract the eye. A diver, a line, a lamp, white rock, blue water. The essentials are exposed. The viewer sees the human body suspended inside a place where it does not naturally belong, supported by equipment and procedure. That is part of the fascination. Cave diving is not about conquering the cave. It is about borrowing permission from physics for a limited time, then leaving before that permission runs out. Every breath makes this clear. The regulator delivers gas. The diver exhales. Bubbles rise until the ceiling stops them. The pressure gauge slowly changes. The cave remains still. A breath that feels ordinary at the mouth is part of a measured supply. The diver cannot forget that for long. Breathing itself becomes part of the navigation of time and distance. Inhale, move, check. Exhale, watch the line, stay calm. The rhythm may look peaceful, but it is supported by calculation. When a diver turns to exit, the system proves itself. The line leads back, the gas reserve remains, the lights continue, the team stays organised. The cave that looked endless becomes a route in reverse. The white passages are seen from the other side. The same arches and walls return, but their meaning changes. On entry, they were invitations. On exit, they are markers passed on the way home. The diver does not need the cave to become less serious. They only need the systems to keep working and the team to keep using them correctly. This is why the return from a cave dive can feel different from the entry. Entry holds curiosity, return holds responsibility. The diver may still look around, still admire the pale gypsum, still notice the water clarity, but the mind has already shifted toward completion. Follow the line, keep position, watch gas, watch the team, keep moving calmly, do not rush, do not relax too early. The exit is not reached until it is reached, and when the first sign of open water or the entrance zone appears, it is not just a visual relief, it is proof that the fragile thread has held. The line, the tanks, the lights, the planning, the checks, the cold water discipline, and the team decisions have all done their work. The cave has not been defeated. It has been visited properly. That distinction matters. Orda is not a place that can be beaten by confidence. It is a place that can be entered only when confidence has been shaped into training. The more one understands these systems, the more the fear of Orda becomes clearer and less theatrical. Divers do not fear it because it is mysterious in a childish sense. They fear it because they understand how much depends on small, practical things. A knot, a valve, a pressure number, a light beam, a hand signal, a line no thicker than a cord. The cave is vast compared with these objects, but the diver's safety is built from them. And still, after all of that, divers return. Not because they have forgotten the danger, but because the danger has been organised into respect. The guideline leads them through the white halls. The tanks give them time. The lights reveal the gypsum rooms. The team keeps the human element from becoming lonely. And somewhere beyond the checks, numbers and procedures, the cave offers the reason people endure the cold and accept the rules in the first place, a beauty that cannot be separated from the discipline required to see it. After all the cold, the distance, the line, and the careful arithmetic of air, it may seem reasonable to ask why anyone would go back to Orda Cave at all. Not in a dramatic way, just as a very practical question from someone sitting comfortably on dry land with warm socks and access to snacks. If a place is cold enough to numb your fingers, dark enough to erase the world without a lamp, and long enough to make every turn a serious decision, why return? Why not look at the photographs once, nod respectfully, and choose a nice shallow reef where the fish are colourful and the water does not feel like it has been personally stored in a freezer? The answer is not simple bravery. It is not that cave divers are fearless. Most experienced cave divers would probably dislike that word. Fearless is not very useful underground. Fearless can forget checks. Fearless can ignore a pressure gauge. Fearless can think a guideline is optional because the water happens to be clear. The divers who return to Orda are usually not people who lack fear. They are people who have learned how to work with it. They know the cave is serious, and that seriousness is part of what makes the beauty feel earned. Orda Cave is famous for its white gypsum passages, huge underwater spaces, cold water, and unusually clear visibility. The official Orda Cave information describes it as Russia's longest underwater labyrinth of corridors and chambers, and emphasises that its gypsum structure makes it look different from typical caves, with ordinary stalactites and stalagmites. The Orda Cave Awareness Project describes the same place in very direct terms: low water temperature, huge underwater passage volumes, and excellent visibility. Those are factual details, but for a diver inside the water, they become something more immediate. The white stone is not just white stone, it is the wall beside your light. The clear water is not just good visibility, it is the space opening ahead of you. The cold is not just a number, it is the reason you planned carefully before entering. That combination is hard to find. There are many beautiful underwater places, there are many challenging caves, there are many cold dives, there are many clear water sites. Orda combines them in a way that feels almost designed to test whether a person can admire something without becoming careless around it. The cave is visually generous. It shows itself. In the right conditions, the water lets divers see far into the passage. The gypsum reflects light. Large galleries can appear almost bright compared with darker caves. A diver can feel as if they are floating through a white stone hall that the world forgot to put above ground. And yet the beauty never becomes casual. That is part of its pull. A place that is easy to enter can be beautiful, of course. A beach at sunset does not need to be dangerous to be worth seeing. But Orda's beauty is different because access is limited by skill. The cave is not available to everyone in the direct physical sense. Most people can only see it through images, video, and the stories of divers. The people who enter it must bring training, equipment, planning, and judgment. That effort changes the experience. It does not make the cave better than other places. It makes the encounter more deliberate. A diver who returns to Orda is not simply chasing a view. They are returning to a process. The preparation, the equipment checks, the cold entry, the adjustment of buoyancy, the first contact with the guideline, the first white wall appearing in the beam, the quiet confirmation that the team is together, the slow movement forward. The awareness that nothing about the dive should be rushed. The beauty is part of that whole sequence, not something separate from it. This is difficult to understand if we imagine beauty as a picture. A picture can be consumed quickly. You look, you react, and you move on. Orda does not work like that for the diver. The view is tied to breathing, temperature, line awareness, and time. You do not simply see the cave, you manage your presence inside it. Every beautiful angle requires control. If a diver kicks carelessly, the water can cloud. If they drift too high, bubbles may strike the ceiling. If they lose attention, the line, the team, or the route can become secondary for exactly the wrong moment. The cave rewards calm movement. It rewards patience. It rewards the kind of attention that is quiet but constant. That may be one of the deepest attractions for cave divers. Orda demands a full kind of focus. not the noisy focus of panic. Not the tense focus of someone trying to prove something, a calmer focus, the kind where the mind becomes organised because it has to. Check the line, check the team, check the gas, watch the walls, move gently, keep breathing steady, notice the passage, but do not be pulled by it. In ordinary life, attention is often scattered into messages, chores, screens, schedules, and small interruptions. Inside a cave, attention narrows. The unnecessary parts fall away. That can feel deeply satisfying when the diver is trained enough to be there safely. The white gypsum spaces add to that sense of focus because they are visually simple and enormous at the same time. There are not crowds of fish flashing by. There are no waving plants or coral gardens. The cave offers stone, water, shadow, light, and scale. In some places, the walls look smooth and pale. In others, they break into cracks, blocks, windows, and arches. The diver's lamp moves across surfaces that may seem clean from a distance, then textured up close. The eye begins to notice small things because there are fewer distractions. A line in the rock, a slope of the floor, a dark gap in a white wall, a teammate's light moving across a chamber far enough away to make them look small. Scale is one of the reasons divers and photographers return. A huge underwater space is hard to describe properly, because the body is not walking through it. The diver is suspended. The floor does not function like a floor in a house. The ceiling is not simply above, it is the barrier between the diver and the surface. The walls are not decorative, they are the cave itself. When a diver floats inside that space, their own size changes in their mind. They are no longer the central thing in the scene. The cave is. That feeling can be humbling in a useful way. Many outdoor places produce it. Mountains do. Deserts do. Ice fields do. The open ocean does. Orda does it from underground. It reminds the diver that human access is temporary and conditional. The cave was there before the diver entered. It will remain after the diver leaves. The diver's job is to pass through without damaging it, without underestimating it, and without treating their short visit as ownership. That humility can become part of the beauty. There is also the rare pleasure of seeing a place that few people will ever see directly. This should not be confused with showing off. There is a quieter version of rarity that has nothing to do with bragging. It is simply the knowledge that the world still contains hidden spaces. Orda is not hidden because it is unknown. It is well known among cave divers. It has been photographed, mapped, discussed, and visited by trained teams. But it remains hidden from normal human experience because the flooded passages require so much to enter. You cannot wander into them by accident during a casual afternoon walk. You cannot step through with a flashlight and comfortable shoes. The cave does not fit ordinary tourism. That restriction makes the photographs matter. The Orda Cave Awareness Project helped show the cave to a wider audience, and major photographic work has made Orda's white underwater passages recognisable far beyond the cave diving community. A 2013 report also described the creation of a spherical underwater cave panorama in Orda, a project connected with Victor Lear-Gushkin's photographic work. These images give non-divers a safe way to see the place, but they also remind divers what careful documentation can do. A photograph taken inside Orda is not only a pretty image, it is evidence of a difficult visit carried out with enough skill to bring the view back. Photography in a place like Orda is not simple. On land, a photographer can move, adjust, talk, step back, change lenses, and ask someone to stand slightly to the left without also worrying about breathing gas and cave navigation. Underwater in a cave, everything is harder. Lights must be placed and managed. The photographer must remain a cave diver first. The model or teammate must remain a cave diver first. Nobody gets to stop following safety rules because the composition is almost perfect. The cave does not care about the shot. This makes successful images even more impressive. The beauty has to be captured without forgetting the systems that keep everyone alive. Some divers return because Orda never feels exactly the same twice. The rock is the same in broad terms. The route may be familiar. The line may run where expected. But the light, visibility, team, body condition, temperature experience and mental state can change the dive. A passage seen from one direction may feel different on the way back. A chamber photographed with one lighting setup may appear completely new with another. A familiar white wall may reveal a detail the diver missed before. In caves, repetition does not always produce boredom. It can produce deeper knowledge. There is comfort in that for trained divers. The first visit may be dominated by the overall impression: cold, white, clear, large, serious. Later visits allow more precise noticing. A diver may begin to understand the personality of different passages. Some feel broad and open. Some feel tighter and more technical. Some are memorable because of shape. Others because of the way the light falls. The official tourism and UNESCO-related descriptions name major galleries such as Chelyabinsk, Krasnoyarsk, Moscow and Sverdlovsk passages, and describe the Moscow passage as a particularly long flooded tunnel. Names help divers talk about the cave, but repeated experience gives those names weight. There is also a deep satisfaction in doing something difficult properly. This is not the same as seeking danger. It is the satisfaction of matching skill to environment. A musician may enjoy a difficult piece because it demands control. A climber may enjoy a technical route because every movement matters. A craftsperson may enjoy a delicate repair because it requires patience. A cave diver may return to Orda because the cave asks for all the skills they have trained for: buoyancy, trim, propulsion, line awareness, gas planning, communication, cold water management, and emotional control. The beauty is not only in what they see, it is in moving through the place well. Moving well in Orda is its own quiet reward. A diver who can hover without touching the floor, turn without disturbing silt, signal without fuss, follow the line without crowding it, and exit with calm reserves has done more than visit. They have behaved correctly in a demanding environment. That matters because caves are vulnerable to careless movement. Clear water can be clouded, surfaces can be damaged, sediment can be stirred. A diver's skill protects the cave as well as the diver. This is one reason Orda's beauty is tied to restraint. The cave does not need a diver to touch it to prove they were there. It does not need souvenirs, scratches, or marks. The best visit is often the one that leaves nothing behind except a careful memory and perhaps images taken responsibly. That kind of restraint may sound less exciting than bold exploration, but in a fragile environment it is more impressive. Anyone can be careless for a moment. It takes discipline to remain gentle when surrounded by something astonishing. The silence also brings divers back. Not absolute silence, because diving has sound, breathing, bubbles, equipment, the soft movement of water. But it is a reduced sound world. No voices, no surface noise, no engines, no wind. The diver communicates through hands and lights. That quiet can make the cave feel intensely present. The white walls do not need to compete with anything. The mind settles into the rhythm of the dive. Inhale, exhale, watch the line, move, pause, signal, continue. For people who are comfortable in that environment, the silence is not empty. It is part of the experience. Of course, comfort here means trained comfort, not casual comfort. No one should confuse the peaceful appearance of a skilled dive with the idea that the cave is easy. The water is still cold, the environment is still overhead, the route still requires planning, the line still matters, the gas still matters. The cave remains serious even when the diver feels at home in it. In fact, the divers who return safely are often the ones who never let familiarity become disrespect. They may know the route, but they do not treat it as harmless. They may love the cave, but they do not imagine the cave loves them back. That may be one of the healthiest relationships a human can have with a dangerous place. There is a phrase divers sometimes use in different forms: the cave will be there tomorrow. It is a practical reminder. If conditions are not right, leave. If the plan says turn, turn. If someone is cold, stressed, or uncertain, exit. Orda's beauty does not expire because a diver makes a conservative decision. The white passages remain. The water remains. The cave continues beneath the ground with the same patience it had before the team arrived. Knowing this can make returning easier. A missed passage is not a defeat. It is simply a reason to keep respect alive. The appeal of Orda also comes from contrast. Above the cave there is a rural landscape, a village, roads, weather, ordinary human time. Below there is cold water inside pale mineral corridors. The diver moves between two versions of Earth. That transition is powerful. One moment, equipment is being prepared near the surface. Later, the diver is floating under rock where the only light is carried by the team. Returning from that world can make the surface feel sharper. Air feels more noticeable. Warmth feels less ordinary. A cup of hot tea becomes not just pleasant but practically heroic. Dry socks may briefly seem like one of civilization's finest achievements, and honestly they have a strong case. But the memory of the cave stays with the diver, not only as danger and not only as beauty. It stays as a particular combination of both. The pale wall in the light, the line running ahead, the teammate's lamp in blue water, the cold pressure around the suit, the slow decision to turn, the sight of the exit zone returning, the feeling afterward when the equipment is off and the mind replays the route in pieces. A dive like that does not always end when the diver leaves the water. It continues as memory, and memory can become invitation. That invitation is not always loud. It may come later, while looking at maps, checking photographs, talking with teammates, or remembering one passage that seemed to continue just beyond the planned turn point. Not in a reckless way, not, I should have pushed farther. More like, there is more to understand. Serious divers often return to caves because knowledge grows slowly. One dive gives a first impression. Several dives build familiarity. Many dives begin to create a relationship with the system, though always a careful one. Orda's beauty is also unusual because it is not lush. Many beautiful places are full of life and colour. Orda's beauty is pale, cold, mineral and spare. It offers less, visually, and somehow that makes each element stronger. White stone, blue water, black shadows, a diver's light, a thin line, a few bubbles moving upward until rock stops them. The scene is not crowded. It is stripped down to essentials. For some people, that spareness is exactly what makes it unforgettable. It is also a beauty that resists easy comfort. A warm beach asks very little from the viewer. Orda asks the viewer, or at least the diver, to hold two truths at once. This place is beautiful. This place can kill the careless. That combination creates respect. It prevents the beauty from becoming decoration. The cave is not a backdrop for human drama. The cave is the main fact. Divers enter, move through, and leave. The cave remains. This may be why Orda has such a strong emotional effect in images. Even people who would never want to dive there can feel the pull of the place. The photographs show a hidden earth that looks almost impossible but is real. They suggest silence, cold, scale, and distance. They let the viewer stand safely outside the risk while still sensing why the risk must be treated seriously. For a sleepy listener, that is probably the best arrangement. Admire the cold cave from a warm room, which is both educational and extremely sensible. For the divers who do return, the beauty is not a reason to ignore fear. It is a reason to prepare well enough that fear stays useful. The cave's white corridors, clear water and huge spaces are worth seeing only if the team can exit safely. That condition shapes everything. The best divers do not separate wonder from caution. They carry both into the water. Wonder keeps the dive meaningful. Caution keeps it possible. And so the cave calls people back, not with noise, not with promises, and certainly not with warmth. It calls through the memory of light on gypsum, through the feeling of moving carefully inside a place few will ever see, through the satisfaction of doing difficult things correctly, and through the knowledge that Earth still has rooms hidden beneath ordinary ground. Order is frightening because it is serious, but it is beloved because its seriousness surrounds something rare. The line leads in, the gas gives time, the lights make the white walls appear. The cold keeps the body honest, the team keeps the human mind steady. And beyond all of that, the cave opens again into pale corridors that seem almost too quiet to belong to the same world as the village above. This is why divers return. Not because order is safe in the simple sense, and not because they have forgotten what can go wrong, but because its beauty is inseparable from the care required to see it. It is a place that asks for discipline before wonder, and then, only if the diver listens, gives wonder back in a form that can stay with them long after they have risen from the dark water and begun the slow journey back toward ordinary air. And now, after the white passages, the cold water, the long corridors, and the thin guideline leading through the dark, it is time to begin drifting back. Not quickly. Nothing in Orda Cave asks to be rushed. Even the way out must be done carefully, one calm movement at a time, with the same respect given to the way in. The cave may be behind us in the story now, but in the mind it still feels close. A pale wall in a beam of light. A diver's bubbles sliding upward until stone stops them. A line stretching forward through clear water. A hand checking a gauge. A lamp turning slowly across gypsum that has no need to be seen, and yet, for a brief while, allows itself to be visible. This is the strange thing about Orda Cave. It is not easy to leave, even when we're only imagining it. The place stays with you. It has a clean, cold shape in the mind. It does not feel crowded with detail, but the few details it gives are strong. White rock, blue water, black darkness beyond the lights. A diver small enough to remind us how large the cave is. A route home that depends on preparation, not luck. These are simple things, but together they create a picture that is difficult to shake off. Perhaps because it is not like most places we think of before sleep. It has no warm lamps, no curtains, no soft chair, no familiar room. It has stone, water, equipment, and silence. And somehow, from a safe distance, that can feel calming. Not calming because it is safe. It is not safe in the ordinary sense. Orda is an advanced cave diving environment, and it should only be entered by people with the right training, the right equipment, the right team, and the right attitude. That point matters. But from here, listening rather than entering, we can let the cave become a quiet reminder of care. Everything inside it depends on care. The diver does not survive by being dramatic. They survive by being exact. They check. They plan. They follow the line. They turn when the gas plan says to turn. They move gently to avoid disturbing the floor. They watch their teammates. They respect the cold. They do not mistake clear water for permission. They do not mistake beauty for safety. There is something restful about that kind of order. The world above ground often feels noisy because so many things compete for attention. Messages, errands, worries, small deadlines, large concerns, the little unfinished tasks that seem to gather at the edge of bedtime like they have formed a committee. But inside a cave, the list becomes shorter and more serious. Breathe, watch the line, stay with the team, check the gas, move slowly, turn back on time, do the next correct thing. There is no room for 20 different thoughts at once. There is no point wondering about tomorrow's email while floating under stone in 4-degree water. The cave gives the mind fewer choices, and because of that, every choice matters. Of course, that is easy to admire from a warm bed. It is much harder in the cave itself. A listener can borrow the calm without borrowing the risk, which is a very good arrangement. You do not need a dry suit tonight. You do not need cylinders or backup lights. You do not need to clip a reel, check a valve, or discover that your thick gloves make your fingers feel like polite sausages. You only need to breathe normally, let your shoulders loosen, and follow the story as it makes its way back toward the surface. Picture the divers now turning around at the planned point, not because they are frightened into leaving, and not because the cave has stopped being beautiful, but because the plan says this is where the dive turns. That is one of the great acts of discipline in places like Orda. The most beautiful passage may still be ahead. The water may still be clear. The team may still feel steady. But the correct decision is not based on wanting more. It is based on returning safely. So the divers turn. Their lights sweep across the same walls from a new angle. The line that led inward now leads home. The cave is no less serious on the return. In some ways, it asks for even more attention, because the mind may start to relax before the body is truly out. The passage looks different on the way back. It often does, even in places we know well. A road driven in the opposite direction can feel unfamiliar. A hallway entered from the far end can seem changed. A cave passage seen with lights facing the other way becomes a new version of itself. A white arch passed earlier now appears from behind. A wall that seemed smooth on entry shows cracks and shadows on exit. A chamber that looked inviting before now feels like a marker on the way home. The route is the same, but the meaning has changed. Inward, the cave asked, "How far will you go?" Outward, it asks, "How well will you return?" The guideline answers quietly. It does not care about the diver's mood. It does not become impatient. It does not admire the scenery. It simply continues toward the exit. In a place so large and pale, that small line is almost humble. It does not look like much compared with the cave around it. Yet for the diver, it is the most trustworthy thing there. White walls can repeat. Openings can resemble other openings. Memory can become uncertain. A light can fail. Visibility can change. But the line, if followed correctly, holds the route. It is a practical object with a very simple message. This way home. That idea feels larger than diving, even though we should not stretch it too far. It is still, quite literally, a line in a cave. But many people understand the comfort of having one reliable thing when the space around them feels too large. A routine at the end of the day, a familiar voice, a cup beside the bed, a window cracked open just enough, a small habit that tells the body, this way toward rest. Not every line is made of cord. Some are made of repetition. Some are made of gentle reminders. Some are made of the quiet decision to stop carrying the whole day at once. The divers continue. Their bubbles rise. The pressure gauges show what remains. The cold still presses through the layers, but the exit is closer now. Not close enough to rush. Rushing is not useful. The cave has already taught that lesson several times. Move steadily. Keep trim. Stay aware. Let the water remain clear behind you. Let the cave be left as it was found. There is a kind of politeness in good cave diving. Not social politeness, with napkins and careful small talk, though that has its place too. This is environmental politeness. Do not scrape the wall. Do not stir the bottom. Do not leave marks. Do not behave as though the cave was waiting for you personally. Visit, observe, and leave. As the route approaches the entrance zone, the character of the dive begins to change. The mind notices signs of return before the body fully arrives. The passage becomes familiar in a different way. The route feels shorter because the exit is now the direction of travel. Perhaps the water ahead opens slightly. Perhaps the darkness changes. Perhaps the divers recognize the first places they passed after entering. In any demanding environment, the approach to safety has its own feeling. Not celebration yet, not carelessness, just the quiet recognition that the plan is working. Then eventually the boundary returns, the place where the cave gives the diver back to the wider world. The surface is no longer an idea somewhere behind a route. It is near. Air that does not come from a cylinder is near. The body may still be cold, The equipment may still be heavy. The dive is not finished until everything is truly finished, but the hardest part of the underground journey is ending. The divers emerge from the flooded white labyrinth into the more ordinary spaces of the cave, and then back toward the surface world above. Imagine the first full breath of normal air after that. Not through a regulator, not measured against a pressure gauge, just air. Cold perhaps, if the day above Orda is cold but open. The kind of air most of us ignore all day because it has the good manners to be available. After a cave dive, that ordinary air must feel different. So must dry ground. So must light that does not come from a battery. So must the simple fact that above your head there is sky instead of rock. The most ordinary things can become remarkable after a place like Orda. Warm hands, a dry hood removed, a zipper opened, someone passing a hot drink. The awkward, heavy process of taking off gear, the strange relief of standing upright again like a land animal who has remembered the original plan. And above the cave, life goes on. The village remains, roads remain, the river valley remains. Weather moves across the land. People continue with their daily tasks, perhaps not thinking at every moment about the cold, flooded cave nearby. That is how it should be. Not every hidden world must occupy the surface all the time. Orda Cave can remain below, doing what caves do best, which is waiting without hurry. The divers leave, the lights leave, the bubbles disappear, the white walls return to darkness. The passages remain full of clear cold water, unseen again until another trained team enters with a plan and enough respect to follow it. This may be the best place to leave Orda tonight. Not conquered, not solved, not reduced to a scary story or a pretty picture. Simply understood a little better. It is a real cave near a real village, made from gypsum and anhydrite, filled with cold water, known for its pale walls and clear flooded corridors. It is beautiful, and it is dangerous. It draws divers back, but only those prepared to treat it properly. Its fear does not come from fantasy. It comes from distance, cold, darkness, overhead rock, and the knowledge that every safe return is built from many small correct actions. There is a quiet respect in that. Orda reminds us that some places should not be softened just because we admire them. A cave does not become gentle because it is beautiful. A long underwater passage does not become forgiving because the water is clear. The white walls do not promise anything, they simply exist. The diver brings the promise, to prepare, to follow the line, to turn back on time, to leave no careless trace and to come home. And now, from our safe distance, we can let the image settle. A final slow look into the flooded passage. The water clear enough to reveal the next pale shape, but dark enough beyond the light to keep its secrets. The guideline resting in the water, the lamp beam moving softly across the gypsum. The diver pausing, not to linger too long, but to take in the view before continuing toward the exit. There is no need for loud music here, no need for sudden drama. The cave is serious enough without being pushed. Its silence does the work. Perhaps that is why Orda fits so well into a sleepy journey. Not because it is comfortable, but because it is still. It shows a version of the world where movement is slow, speech is unnecessary, and attention becomes simple. It asks us to notice the difference between fear and panic, between beauty and safety, between wanting to continue and knowing when to turn back. These are useful distinctions, even far from any cave, especially at night, when the mind sometimes wanders into its own long corridors and needs a small line to follow home. So, as we drift back from the underwater labyrinth, let your own room become clearer again. The cave is far away now. The cold water is only a thought. The white gypsum walls are only an image behind your eyes. You're not under rock. You do not need to check a gauge. You do not need to follow a guideline with your hand. You can simply notice the air around you, the support beneath you, and the quiet fact that you are here, above ground, safe from the flooded dark. And I wonder, as we come back to the surface together, where are you listening from tonight? Is it late where you are? Is your room dark already? Or is there still a little light at the window? Somewhere in the world, water rests inside Orda Cave without needing an answer. Somewhere above it, the village goes on with ordinary life. Somewhere else, perhaps very far away, you are listening to the story of that hidden place while your own day begins to loosen and fade. If this quiet journey into Orda Cave has helped you feel calm, curious, or a little more connected to the strange hidden rooms of our planet, I'd be very grateful if you liked the video and subscribed. It helps this channel continue bringing you gentle trips into places most of us will never visit in person, from deep caves to distant worlds, from forgotten histories to the science tucked quietly behind ordinary things. And if someone you know enjoys mysterious places, careful exploration, or sleepy science told without hurry, perhaps share this with them too. They may prefer visiting Orda Cave from a warm bed, which honestly is a very wise choice. For now, the dive is over. The equipment is set down. The lights are switched off. The guideline remains in the cave, waiting for people trained enough to use it. The cold water closes back into darkness. The white corridors return to silence. Nothing has been taken from them. Nothing needs to be added. Orda Cave remains what it was before we arrived in words, a pale underwater labyrinth beneath the earth, beautiful enough to draw divers back, serious enough to make them plan every breath, and quiet enough to remind us that some of the most astonishing places on Earth are hidden not in the sky but below our feet. Sleep well, fellow traveller. Stay warm, breathe easily, and let the cave fade now into the distance, back under the village, under the hill, under the dark water, where the white walls wait without hurry.